Now we can, okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 4th budget workshop session number 1 for the Portsmouth School Board. This is budget season, so we're gearing up for this special time of year for us and other city departments. So I will ask Patty to do the roll call.
Okay, Liz Barrett,
Donner Way.
Fish Campbell,
Here.
Nancy Claiberg,
Here.
Pip Clues, Brian French,
Here.
Lee Hudson, Byron Maddow,
Here.
Carrie Nolte, here, Lisa Rappaport, here, Eric Moore, Nathan Delaney.
Week 6. Okay, great. Thank you, Patty. Can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna, thank you,
Sorry.
thank you.
Zach is the star of the show.
Well,
On
Zach's-
TV.
Oh.
Next midsection during the start of the show, we'll take care of that camera angle.
Okay,
That one's.
before we start, I just want to thank Brian for this wonderful presentation for our budget. He did a great job putting it all together. And I like the PowerPoint we had the other night. That was really a good summary of what's going on. So we'll thank him when we see him.
Yep.
He is on the Oyster River School Board, correct?
Yep, and he's finishing up his time with them, and they have their budget presentation this evening. He's the lead on their budget committee. So one of his last duties is to present their budget.
Okay.
So,
It's always good to bounce off of them. What do they do at Oyster River?
yeah, well, there you go. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Zach, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, first, you have to
Public
open
hearing.
the public hearing.
Yes, let's open up the public hearing. Anyone like to speak? There's no one here in the audience. Oh, Kate would like to speak. I didn't know if you were here just as an observer or, yeah, Kate Cook, our city councilor.
Thank you all for letting me come tonight. First thing I wanted to do was just congratulate you on getting redistricting done. I know that that was quite a process and I'm so glad that you managed to get through it and finish it. That was a lot of work, so thank you so much. I'm here about the budget because I'm sure you've heard that the city council has asked for caps on the budget at 2.9% maximum, and some of us even want less than that. It's very challenging, I know, to come in at a certain figure when you have contracts. The city, we deal with 17 union contracts at the city council level, and that's approximately 83% of our budget. And those are contracted services that bring you in at a certain level. So whenever you ask for a budget that comes in under 3%, essentially what you're asking is for everyone to find efficiencies elsewhere. And so I know the challenges of coming in lower budget. I came to tonight because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of my experience as a parent in schools and what I saw with my daughter in the school last year graduating, and what I think maybe is an area that you should at least look at. And there have been studies at the national level for the last 50 years of student-teacher ratios in classrooms, and looking at whether or not classroom instruction is more effective and test scores improve if you reduce the classroom size. So if you reduce the ratio of students to teachers in the classroom. What those studies have shown is that there really is no evidence that a smaller classroom size provides a better instructional environment or improves test scores for students. Except maybe in one area, and that's in kindergarten classrooms where there isn't strong education being provided. And you ask why I know these things. I do have a master's in education. I did teach. My mother is a superintendent of schools. So it was really easy for me to ask, her, where do you find this research, and look up the data. And so I looked at these studies and I said, okay, so what does that mean for our schools? we have a very low teacher to student ratio. And we have declining enrollment right now, as you all know, especially, I think the high school this year had a really large hit in enrollment numbers this year. And as enrollment has declined, we haven't necessarily lost as many teachers as you would expect to lose over time with that declining enrollment. When I went to enroll my child last year, mid-year, at the high school, so my child transferred into the high school, we had a hard time getting classes in the school. And one of the reasons we had such a hard time is because the classes were all limited at 12 students per. So the students were, like, the classes were basically capped at 12, which gave us a high school ratio of 12-1 in the classroom. But then it became very, very difficult to find classes for anybody coming in at that level. That also means that classes become very exclusive to only certain students. Especially if you're only offering, say, one calculus class in a term, that would be 12 students get to take calculus. You're only offering 2 of those classes in a year. There's only 24 students in a class that get to take calculus. I know from my high school experience in a much smaller high school, we had over 30 students taking calculus in a year. So that tells me that we're artificially also limiting the number of students who are allowed to take certain classes because of that gap. Well, in the classroom. That also, when you have such a heavy load at the high school, such a huge number of teachers at a high school level, it means that you're not spending a lot of dollars in the high school and maybe you're not necessarily spending as much money on instruction at the elementary and middle schools or on capital improvement projects. And that we know has been a challenge with buildings in the schools because we have a lot of maintenance that we need to go back and do, and a lot of projects that kind of have sat on the back burner because we have such a large budget that is dedicated to instruction. So what I was going to suggest to you is to seriously consider offering early retirement. The last thing I would want to suggest is that you lay off teachers. That is not something that I want to see. And in the budget process over the last 2 years, I've asked the superintendent in both years, is there a process for teachers retiring as we have declining enrollment and just not replacing them? If we're not seeing that process move at the pace that you need, just consider an early buyout package potentially for teachers. Because if you increase your enrollment at the high school just from 12 to 18 in a classroom, which would be much more standard for a high school classroom, you'd be eliminating 25% of those classrooms. So that's just something to think about as an option. And a place to potentially find savings. Another thing that I was going to suggest that you look at, and it's something we're talking about at the city level, is finding spaces where we can find efficiencies across all departments. Either it being IT, and I know our IT departments are not integrated now, but it's something that we can start considering and thinking about now that the city has a robust IT department, but also in maintenance and potentially custodial services. I know there are challenges there around background checks, but I think that all of our staff could get background checked. I've done that before with YMCA staff, where everyone in the building has a background check, even if they don't directly interact with the kids. That can be done with the city staff as well. But it would be great if we could all work together to try to find some of these efficiencies, because I think the challenge really is that our taxpayers are really hurting. And the reappraisal this year just amplified the challenges that we're going to have, especially if we see declining support from the state and from the federal level. And so I have real concerns about what that looks like down the road if we're not preparing ahead. So that's why I would come and share my thoughts with you, because we don't get to talk between the city council and the school board very often. And I find that if we all have different hearings and we don't hear each other's, then you don't get to hear what I'm saying when I'm sitting and talking with the superintendent.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you very much. Thank you for your hard work on the council. Okay, next we have, do we have anyone on the Zoom? Oh, because you're always on Zoom. You're the representative.
I've been on Zoom this tonight because this is like such an awkward spot for me to be in. Well, can we move this around?
Well, yeah, move your seat if you want to. Do you want to sit over there?
Yeah, I'm going to set up.
Okay. I guess we turn it over to that. Do you want to open up the?
Sure. So couple things. Tom Watson's here from technology. And I think the other night when we had talked about some of the people who are talked to that we had already scheduled in advance of any dialogue with the board. Areas that we identified were areas where you were seeing budget growth. So Tom, I'm sure he'll get to it. I mean, part of the increase Brian talked about was a $320,000 increase in tech, and there's all kinds of reasons why that is. So we want to kind of talk through that. It might be, although Tom was unprompted for this, maybe we could get into a little bit of what Councilor Cook just mentioned about what are some of the things that have been explored in the past around IT interconnection and what are some of the challenges that are present between city kind of ecosystem and our ecosystem a little bit. I know I didn't prep you for any of that. It's whatever you do is great. The other thing, when Tom's done, I'm definitely happy to, before we adjourn for the night, talk a little bit about other, rather than people, what are the types of questions and information and knowledge you feel like you want in order to make thoughtful decisions during this budget process, so that we can go and try to iterate the people and the materials you need in order to kind of access that stuff. I'll also give you later a paper copy of our organizational chart of all the different people who work in the system, and I'll provide a link to a digital copy as well that's is dynamic and you can. But I want to talk you through a little bit about what's in that so that you can understand some of the funding sources that are connected to different types of people. But anyways, Tom's here. Tom also did a lot to help us get all set up so that we could have the technology to be able to use this room in the types of ways that we're going to use it tonight. So
They've been
thanks.
working in here this afternoon when I was in here setting up, so thank you. Big work.
Well, I mean, we might have strategically set it up so Tom's presentation was right when we
You
needed
know,
the work
worked
done.
out that
I
way.
mean,
Sometimes these things work out.
but anyways, Tom is a real asset, very thoughtful guy. And so we're happy to have him here to kind of talk you through what's happening in IT and take your questions. So I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thank you. Thank you. So why don't I just go ahead and start with addressing the question there about IT service. Where we can, work together, where we, find challenges and all that sort of thing. So just to give some background, the school and the city IT department already do work together in many different ways. We are constantly keeping each other up to date. We share a financial database system with the city. All of that is connected. Our libraries are connected. We share some other resources. Our network actually is the initial fiber installation of our network. It's a city school combined project. So there are definitely many ways that we do work together. Our webpage actually is hosted primarily and updated primarily by the city as far as the structure is concerned. Which I'll put a plug in here that the web page is actually changing tonight. Our actual URL is changing to enforcementnh.gov away from the cityenforcement.com. And that is actually happening this evening. It should be live for tomorrow morning. The places where we find it more challenging is that the city, the municipal side of the house is really much more of a business. You're talking an awful lot of office spaces and tax collecting, all those sorts of things. It's a very business oriented proposition. When we get to the school, it's a very different focus. We're education. So yes, we have business entities inside the school, and like with the financial database system that we use, we do interact on all those sorts of things. But when we get into the education space, it's a very different animal. We are much more interested in how the teachers, students can interact to get that education, across all the things that we do in a classroom, all the things that the teachers do. Those are the things that we really have to support. And it's a very, very different setup than what you see in a business organization. And we end up ultimately, just by sheer number of users and devices, the school department absolutely dwarfs the municipal side. We have somewhere around roughly 3,000 users. And I think the city has, I think somewhere around 500 or so. So we actually have a ton more users, a ton more devices that we have to support, that sort of thing. So there are places where we can interact, and I do appreciate when we can, and certainly to find those efficiencies. But there are also other challenges that we have the city just does not have. Not to say one's good or one's better than the other, whatever, but they're just totally different. So those are some of the things that make it more challenging to totally merge in everything that we do. So I don't know if you have any questions on that.
Excuse me, I mean, and for the most part, we're very heavily tethered to a Google environment in
Absolutely.
terms of what we're
Yes.
doing. And the city is much more so of a kind of Microsoft
Yeah.
type of,
We do Google Classroom,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And yeah, the city is much more tethered to Microsoft. So there are different environments that we're on as well. The brief overview of it. Happy to discuss more details at another time if you're interested. Yes.
So I had a couple questions. You mentioned sharing a financial database and you said our libraries are connected. What is the library? Is this?
There's just a library, the catalog system
Okay.
and such. We actually, the public library has their catalog system, and we actually use that as well in the school libraries.
Okay,
Yeah, you can actually, they can actually share books back and forth, that sort of thing.
I see. So like an actual library. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, not like a, okay.
Yeah, not like a database library.
And then, yeah, you mentioned the roughly 30,000 users. Can you break down a little bit like what cohorts that entails?
3,000 users.
Oh, 3,000.
Yeah,
Okay,
3,000.
I was like 30,000.
If I said 30,000, I misspoke. Yeah, 3,000.
I heard.
Okay. So of those, we have, I think we have close to, we're just shy of 500, I think, staff. And so the remainder of it, the 2,500 or so is students, give or take, it's somewhere around there. But yeah, we give accounts to, everybody from kindergarten straight on up.
Yeah. And then on the, you mentioned sort of like the different ecosystems, Microsoft uses, the 3K users. I guess your like whatever your not Active Records, that's Microsoft, whatever like the Google record system is that what you're using as like the primary identifiers for like all of the 3K users that are in your Google system? Is that, or is there a different?
You mean, are you talking about identifying the
Yeah.
number of users? Or are you talking about what we use for authentication?
Well, I mean, just like, so the different ecosystems, so it's Microsoft, like, I think it's Active Record is like the
Active Directory.
Active Directory.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like you're in a different system on the Google side, or you're managing the, or is that on the city side? Are you managing that on the Microsoft side, like all your actual users?
Oh, well, if you want to get into the details,
Yeah.
we actually do single sign-on
Single-
through Microsoft Entra, which feeds into Google, which feeds into many other systems,
Okay.
including our Infinite Campus. So, Infinite Campus, Zoom, there's a whole slew of other third-party digital tools that are dependent upon.
I'm good for now.
Okay.
Are we going to the budget now or are you
Yep.
sharing more? Okay, I guess,
If you want to jump in.
yeah, so I guess first glance here, taking a look at the first page of the 177 tech plan. There's a $72,000 line item for cybersecurity initiatives, which is an increase from, I don't see it as a line item from last year.
That is correct, yeah.
So can you explain that more? MDR?
Yeah, actually, Well, I threw together a couple of slides. Do you mind if I go?
Yeah, well, yeah, that's
through the
fine.
slides?
Yeah, I wasn't sure where we were going.
Get to that.
Okay.
Are we looking at 177 or does this cover multiple budget areas?
It covers multiple budget areas, primarily 177 is the largest one, 178,
Okay,
another one that,
and what about,
technology, and 136 is media budget, which is also falls under technology.
okay, so 177, 178, and 136?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. I didn't see. Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Okay, I promise no death by PowerPoint or Google slides in this case. Just to discuss some of the highlights of technology in our Portsmouth schools. So we've had some projects and focus on this year. Actually, some of it is specifically geared towards cybersecurity. So we went through a staff password security upgrade. Essentially, we started enforcing some additional policies for the password length. In particular, we increased the
I'm
length.
sorry, I'm hard of hearing and this is like, it's really hard for me. It looks like this window might be open. Is there a way somebody could shut it so there's not?
I don't think it is.
background?
I think the heaters are going.
The window over here is,
Yeah.
Okay,
windows are all shut.
sorry, I'm hard of hearing and it's just a lot. Okay, go ahead.
Unfortunately, sorry. It is a drafting room. So we increased the length of and the complexity of the password requirements, and then that forced a number of people to upgrade passwords, update their passwords to meet that requirement. Also, we implemented multi-factor authentication for staff across the board. It was optional, and then we made it this year we made it required. So that just means, I'm sure you guys are probably familiar, when you type in a username and password, you might get prompted on your phone or whatever to enter a code. To prove who you are. So those were definitely cybersecurity related. We also actually upgraded all of the wireless access points in the high school. So we jumped to Wi-Fi 6 access points for better speed coverage there at the high school. We also implemented outdoor wireless access points at all of the buildings so that we can actually cover the evacuation areas in case there's an emergency. We can make better use of our NAV 360 app. Let's see, Incident IQ is our new help desk system that we implemented. We moved from an older version thing called Track It and into Incident IQ, which is really geared much more towards schools and the workflow of schools. And that's been pretty positive. We've had a good response from staff on that. It's pretty easy to use.
I think I was gonna say, one of the things about that, which I think creates efficiencies, is that as you go in, just like any engagement with any customer service at a major corporation at this point, there's a lot of FAQs
Yeah.
where it's like, you don't have to engage someone on staff. A lot of the core things are there. They're very easy for folks to engage with. I think that's been one of the things that I assume we've seen some efficiencies in terms of what's happening with staff.
Yeah.
Connected to that new system.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it also is set up with a menu system that allows you to go drill right down to, this particular device is having an issue. And all of that information is pre-populated. So if a teacher has a problem with their laptop, we already know what the serial number on the laptop is, and all that sort of thing. So it saves a lot of time. Going back to cybersecurity, so we updated our data governance plan. This is in the early summer timeframe of last year. So it's been quite a while, but that addresses a lot of our cybersecurity concerns and a lot of our student data privacy concerns, the things that we need to do to kind of keep on top of things. Some of the things we're looking to move forward to actually, efficiencies here definitely. So we're implementing some additional Microsoft endpoint management and Apple endpoint management to we're getting more heavily into Intune for Microsoft side and Mozilla, well, Entra and Intune for Microsoft and Mozilla for the Apple endpoints, so that we can more easily manage all of the software that is on the devices. Our teachers at the elementaries have Apple MacBooks, and our teachers at high school and middle school have Windows laptops. So we're able to push out all of the updates, the security updates and things like that to not only to the operating system itself, but also the software that's on the laptops, and do so kind of centrally instead of having to worry about, well, wait, is this laptop up to date or not? We've been working with the student services department on a digital archive solution. That's kind of where we're piloting this. They have a number of old records that are in archived and sitting in boxes and all that sort of thing, which is not necessarily efficient and really hard to go and find things. So we started with them because they were kind of an easy target for this, an easy place to go that it really will help them. And we're working with an outside vendor on that solution. If it works well, there's potential that we could start using that for other items as well. I know central office has a number of needs that we could fill. So I'm really interested to see how well this one works out. And another thing that we are working on and will continue to work on is digital tool consolidation. So I've taken to stop calling things, software apps, online tools, software as a service, whatever you want to call it. There's all sorts of different, platforms, programs, whatever you want to call it, cloud-based, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just trying to throw this all under the title of digital tool. So if it's some sort of software-based thing that's either here in the cloud, anywhere else, I'm going to call it a digital tool. So what we're trying to do is consolidate all of those digital tools, and get a better handling on what all is out there, what we're using, why we're using it. Do we have the right license level for the tools that we're using? Do we have too many licenses? Do we have not enough licenses? What we're finding is that we purchased a lot of online licenses for things while we were going through COVID and the years afterwards. And now we're looking at those again and saying, do we still need them? Are we using them? How much are they used? Are they being used in classrooms? If they're not being used, let's scale back, the number of licenses, or if it's not being used at all, we'll eliminate it. So those are some of the things that we're trying to do. Over on the database side, we implemented Infinite Campus payments and campus fees. So something that's actually been really pretty good. We've been able to, if a student, has a library book that they lost, we can charge a fee online and parents can pay online. We use this heavily for the Chromebooks at the high school and the middle school to buy into the repair program. So we had an option this year, beginning of this year, to go ahead and buy into that repair program using credit cards and online, which I think, at least from what I saw on my end, it seemed to be a big hit with parents to be able to do that, not have to either find cash or write a check. Civil rights data collection is something that we generally do every 2 years. We kind of got into an oddball cycle, so it's actually doing 2 years in a row. We're not quite done with that. It's still in process, but for the most part, it's more done than not. So I'm putting
That's a massive
completed.
That's a huge.
It's a huge project.
Yeah.
Involves many, many different people. It's the we pull a lot of the information from Infinite Campus, so it's all the student related types of things. We pull a lot of things from the business office, we pull things from technology, we pull things from, many people contribute to this. And then Mike and Carly, who are our database administrators, are the ones who actually shepherd this all the way through and then check anomalies and eventually send it over your way.
Yep.
Over to
And
that.
they do a great job.
Yeah. Some of the upcoming projects in the database world. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but the state is moving to a new data collection. They're upgrading their data collection system for our student records to the state. It used to be called I4C was the system. Now they're migrating to a newly developed system called Index. Cleverly NH for the N there. And we're in the process of, the state is in the process of implementing that. It's going to be somewhat of a challenging process, realistically speaking, because they're changing some of the data fields and some of the things that they want us to collect now. And they want us to report on. So this is, again, ends up being a kind of a system, an SAU-wide implementation, because, we have to let the clericals know at the elementary level and the middle school and high school, okay, now you gotta report on this data, you gotta enter, click this checkbox, enter this field and all that sort of thing. So it is pretty far reaching. And one of the things we're looking to do in the database realm is implement the.
The window's open.
Oh, Lord, open. That's the first time. I haven't seen that since I've been here.
Oh, broken.
Oh, no.
So,
Can we move rooms to the other conference room over there?
I don't know what the availability of conference room A is for the moment.
I can go check.
It's closed, at least.
Holy, this is, yeah.
You like muscled it right in there to get. Sure.
This side is.
Appreciate it. The state of engineering.
Well, I don't.
I'm sorry.
I don't think the wind appreciated the database.
People have like
Change fields.
So.
one person meeting and they're like, it's not, they out, out.
Yeah, mine's out now too.
Okay,
So that would lead to it again, repeating.
yeah.
process. So let me,
That would be nice.
It is.
I love ideas.
We had nice years.
Yeah, it's empty. I say we move it there.
It's like, yeah, it's completely slow out of it.
Oh, two interrupts.
What would be, what would be the strategy?
Pull up the window and then, okay.
Turn it off and turn it on
You
again.
think-
Yeah, reboot.
Plug it.
Well, let's continue. See what happens.
Quite the gosh, that was quite the.
I think we just, that was a sign to go home. I'm not here. Why did you have to go? It was like, the spirits are calling us to go snuggle under a blanket on our couch. That's,
So.
can I have a
All right, so,
second?
I was watching Ghost Stories.
so we had an event when you were about to hit IC
yes,
event.
I was gonna talk about IC. So
It's my
IC
best thing for you.
has events and actions, which is a module that we can start to implement and use. Basically what it does is we can use it to, if an event happens, an action takes place. So we can use it to trigger certain things. So, if a student, just for example, withdraws, and we can set up a series of actions to flow from that. So as a student withdraws, okay, notify the library that, okay, we need the books back, notify IT that we need the Chromebooks back, notify, the grade office that, or the registrar that the grades are gonna have to be sent to whatever the new district is, all those sorts of things. So it has a lot of potential, but of course, it's gonna take a lot of setup to do. Yes.
Can you just, and I'm scared for the answer, tell me what happens currently?
He currently is a manual process.
So all of those things.
Yeah, all of those things are
And who
manual.
is doing that?
Different people. It depends upon, like, just for example, if somebody withdraws, okay, somebody in guidance has to notify the registrar, oh, this person withdrew. Okay, then we have to be notified in IT, hey, this person withdrew, so be looking for their Chromebook to come back. And sometimes, honestly, sometimes it's an issue because we don't find out about something because, it got dropped, somebody dropped the ball because we're all humans, right? And, we don't hear about this withdrawal until maybe it's a couple of weeks later. So sometimes that does happen, absolutely. This kind of a thing would be able to kind of push that along so that the people who are involved in the process, and this is just one example, obviously there are many other examples, but the people who are involved in the process would be able to know, okay, yes, this is happening. Now we need to, do X in our region. This is what our task is. Any other questions on that or? No, okay.
Is there any sort of consent for staff and students to be entered into this new system? I guess with the data mining that's going on at the federal government level now, I guess I worry that there's going to be a trickle down effect. And, obviously there's a lot of information shared with the state, but is there any sort of consent or protection to protect the city with that information being shared? Like,
So
is there?
the
is
first
people
part,
sign-
to start with the fact that I see it, so this would be what Tom was just talking about.
Yeah.
The module added
Added on to.
to IC, so
student
Infinite,
information.
and Infinite Campus, I'm sure, from.
But the new
as a
student
parent.
record database, is there any sort of consent that's gonna come along with that?
Are you talking about the
That's the
index
state.
at the state
Yeah.
level?
Yeah, and that's, or what information we are sharing as a city with,
So the information that we share with the city, and we have been sharing through the I4C system, the old system, and now we're moving over to this index system, is basically aggregate data, and what they get is, what they get is identified, it has an identifier with it, but not a name. So they don't, and that's basically kind of the way it's set up with the state, is that they don't have a way of tracking it back to an individual student or.
they do though, because
anything.
each child has a identification number.
But they don't know, there's a
The data
disconnect in
set.
the middle, so they
Okay.
don't know which student it is. They'll
Okay.
have a number to tie it to, but they don't have a student name, all that sort of thing to tie it to.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure. Sure. Deployments and installations, basically the things we focused on, as far as student machines and such is, high school, we, have our one-to-one program, of Chromebooks. We hand them out to freshmen, every year. And rotate them through and collect them again when they leave as seniors. At the middle school, we do the same thing, with Chromebooks, one-to-one Chromebooks. Hand them out to grade 6, and then we collect them again, essentially, when they leave. The difference between the two one-to-one opportunities, I guess, is that the middle school, they generally keep the Chromebooks in the class, not in the classroom, but in the building. They may take them around the building, but they generally stay there. They don't come home as much. There are some exceptions to that. And at the high school, we hand them the Chromebook. Here's your Chromebook. You're responsible for it. Bring it to class every day, take it home, use it, all that sort of thing. So 2 different styles and programs. Yes.
Curiosity on the Chromebooks, like what's the longevity cycle for one of those Chromebooks?
Well, it's interesting that you asked. So we actually, the most useful lifespan is somewhere around 5 years. They actually Google just changed their update support for Chromebooks to extend the actual
Like the-
it's AUP. I forget what the acronym stands for.
Acceptable use.
But anyway, it's not that. But anyway,
Okay.
but their update support runs for 10 years now for any device. So if you buy a device brand new model,
Their OS
that sort
will
of thing,
work on
your
it.
OS will continue to work and be upgraded for 10 years.
Okay.
Which is actually pretty good. Whether you want to be using the Chromebook still 10 years from now because of the hardware, probably not. But
Do you all have like a policy around life cycle around like the?
yeah, actually what we've been, yes, we have.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm
It's
actually gonna,
really complicated, and I just remember the conversation being like, oh, it's really hard.
actually, I have a couple of slides towards
Okay.
the
I'm
end.
not laughing at the question, I'm just like, buckle up.
But as far as our Chromebooks are concerned, we actually cycle them through the high school and middle school, and then generally what goes to middle school, because they're only 3 years old, we'll actually take and get those last 2 years of usable life, so to speak, migrate those down to the elementary level, get those and cycle them through there so we get the rest of the lifespan out of them. And then pretty much
Yeah.
they're off to the recycling land.
Yeah.
And that's it. But it's gotten better over the years because Google has changed and expanded that update policy. Because prior to that, we had Chromebooks that, we might have bought, and a couple of years later, they're not getting updates anymore. And once the Chrome OS can't be updated, start to end up with software that won't run. Obviously, it becomes a security risk and all that sort of thing as well.
Just maybe this is too in the weeds, but is the vendor Google itself? Like, who is the? Yeah.
So Google develops the Chrome OS
Oh, sure.
operating
Yeah,
system,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they set the standards for all of the hardware manufacturers, that what they have to meet, and how they basically have to design their Chromebooks, the certain basic
Yeah.
features that they have. The Chromebooks that we buy are made by Dell.
Okay. I was just looking, for like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can buy them from Lenovo, you can buy them from
Yeah.
Acer, you can buy them from a bunch of other ones, but the ones we happen to buy are Dell.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
Yes,
You just told me about elementary.
yes. What would you like to know about
I
elementary?
know there's carts and they go into different rooms, but
So
are they?
the elementary schools, right now they are each a little bit unique, but with primarily, let's put it this way, for Chromebooks, primarily they use Chromebooks from grades 3 to 5. Don Darrow and New Franklin actually have either a cart or a cabinet in each one of those classrooms. So they have a classroom set and they stay in the classroom. So the kids in, whatever, room 3, the charging cart or rack in the wall. At Little Harbor right now, they're in a cart that they have enough to have one in each room. Or a class set in each room, but right now they use them in carts. It's kind of one of those conversations that we've had over the years. I think in the long run, I think Little Harbor might end up heading that direction, or we put them in the classrooms. But again, on a basic level, is the Chromebooks are used from 3 to 5, and then intentionally K-2 don't use as much technology. And where they do, they tend to favor more iPads rather than Chromebooks. So we have some iPads at those lower levels, but it's definitely not a 1-to-1 kind of ratio at those levels where it is from 3 to 5.
So I know that the time, or totally my experience as a parent only, so I don't know the bigger systems at all. But I know that the time that they use the Chromebooks is pretty minimal. And that may vary based on class, but I'm curious if there was like another reason to have 1-to-1. Or do you seem like, I mean, I know it's super old, but we used to have the computer lab and you'd have different times or things like that. But I guess, is there like another security need or something else of why we need that many devices for?
At the elementary level?
Yeah.
Specifically?
Yeah.
It's more of a curricular.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a security issue. There are certain things, for instance, the new math program will have availability for activities for the whole class to do on the computer instead of handing out worksheets. So there's been a transition away from handing out workbooks or worksheets to doing certain things on a Chrome device or other device instead of the paper.
I would say pedagogically, that's what's changed. I think
Yep.
about as a student going to the computer lab, and it was there were only certain teachers that would use it, and it was an add-on type of thing.
Yeah.
And then as a teacher, I can remember going through a period of time, as somebody who used to kind of try to be on the front edge of like what was going on technology wise, where the lab used to drive me bananas because I couldn't count on the fact I would design lessons in a
Yeah.
unit.
And
And I
I'm
couldn't count
not
the fact-
suggesting a lab
Process.
by any
Well,
means, like that.
and even carts, it was like, if I didn't know the course of my planning as I was developing lessons, if I was trying to integrate technology in a thoughtful way that I thought was gonna extend my instruction. If I was like, well, I have this stuff that builds up to this project that is gonna be kind of laptop dependent in terms of some of what I want students to do. If I couldn't bank on the fact that I was gonna have access when I wanted it, then I was like, I'm not gonna plan to embed tech in what I'm doing. I'm trying to go to some other approach. So I know as I moved out of schools that were lab-based or like one cart for the department, but then everybody's gonna sign up and who gets there earliest on a Monday to sign up for the week. And that it totally changed, revolutionized how I could plan, because then it was like, I have this tool that is always available to me and students. And now more and more of what we do in terms of some of the curricular stuff we do is becoming increasingly embedded, where there's an expectation that there's some type of technology that we're using. So
And it really lines up with just getting students ready for the world after school. These are ubiquitous now. You want to get them used to this instead of being the fun time at the lab, the one time in a month you go. So they're used to it, and we do spend time in third grade with keyboarding skills so that we're not doing the hunt and peck, so that they can actually be useful instead of something that they'll play with.
Lisa,
I think what I have maybe a little bit of a curricular question and a little bit of a tech question. I'm also just curious about the consolidation of all the different types of apps and software and digital tools that we're using across all the classrooms. And it's hard to say a single app would suddenly save us a whole teacher's salary, but at the same time, it does feel like, from my unscientific sample of 2 children, like it's a vast number of sometimes really fun and really engaging things, but very different things, which I imagine all have different licenses and costs. So is there anything you're thinking about, either in planning how we're gonna do the curriculum or how we're gonna consolidate tech, where we might say, Google first, since we're paying for that, or I don't know if that's really the priority, but just as an example, I don't know.
do you want to talk
It's a
through that?
lot.
Because this has been a conversation.
Yeah.
That's amped up more this year, but has been present in this, like, okay, ESSER's going away. We invested more money than we typically would on digital tools during that period of time. And now, as we're coming to the end of that period, really assessing what's going to stay and how many subscriptions are going to stay. And I know we've had, whether it's Screencastify or it's Pear Deck or it's whatever, we're having some of those conversations about like which of those in over that time, because, and I'll stop talking, let Tom talk in a second here, but over that time, we had this kind of large variety of offerings that staff could kind of grab from. You have some pockets of people who became very entrenched with certain tools, but they're small pockets.
Yep.
And so I think some of the conversations that are challenging are folks who are like, well, geez,
I love this thing.
I have this amazing thing, which in my Google Classroom
Yep.
is totally, kids can be out, everything's accessible. I use these 4 apps to make that work. But maybe there's 5 other people who are using that app.
Right.
And so there's some tough conversations that we're having with folks around some of those things. So
Screencastify could be a great example of my question, because I think that's one where I know several teachers who use it for great projects.
Yep.
But I don't know that anyone is teaching kids how to use it as part of the curriculum. And then it seems like there's also other types of video things that we're using that have similar functionality.
And actually,
I
it
don't
is,
mean to pick on that one thing.
no,
but-
it actually is a good
Good
example,
example.
because it's something that we were looking specifically at
It's
Screencastify.
cool.
And it is cool.
Well, and I love Screencastify. I use it professionally and then use it for a bunch of things. But yeah,
Absolutely. And it has its place.
Right.
But we started exploring some other tools because we were looking at, tools that would do more. Okay, so we, for example, we were looking into Edpuzzle is one of the big things we use as well. And it has a screen capture functionality. So we had a whole bunch of conversations with Edpuzzle and with Screencastify. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, Edpuzzle, we thought that was going to be the solution, but we found out that it doesn't actually have a screen capture capability for students. So because of that, we ended up having to stay down the road of going with Screencastify, for certain projects and things like that.
Well,
So those
some
are
of
the
the
things,
connected middle school.
and that was in
middle school
particular with the middle
parent
school
conference.
exactly.
Where
with
kids are doing self-directed parent conferences using Screencastify.
Correct.
And then it didn't, Edpuzzle wasn't gonna have that
Correct.
capability.
So as we go through all of this, we're gonna find some things that, yes, in fact, we can consolidate. Hey, Google does that. They have an option that does something, Yes, absolutely. We're not moving away from Google. We're too entrenched in Google Classroom and all that sort of thing. So if Google has a tool, great, we're gonna point you there first.
Right.
And that'll save us on the other end. But if there's something that, Google or, some of the other ones don't do, then it's, we're gonna have to make those concessions and decide, okay, yeah, this one stays, this one, we could really get rid of.
Do you feel like there's enough things at the edges that it could really make a difference in the budget? Because I feel like there's so many things where it's like, a little bit here, a little bit there, and it's hard for me to add that up to even one teacher's salary, but I don't know if I have a good handle on it.
I'm not incredibly hopeful on
Yeah.
the software side,
Right.
unfortunately, because I do
Too
know
many.
that there's the ones that we're most likely going to save are going to be the smaller ones. The big ones that we pay, a lot of money for
You need.
are they're the ones that we
Yeah.
need, and they're the ones that we can't really get rid of. But, along those lines, we still want to save those, even if it's a couple $1,000 here and there, that soon adds up and makes a difference.
And I think we've had some of those, so throughout what we were bringing you, there's been a lot of, a couple $100 here, $1,000 here. There's been a lot of screening out. So doesn't mean we can't go deeper. But there's been a lot of work to kind of claw out things that either were asked as new items or Brian spent a lot of time going back and looking at, okay, over the last 3 years, what is our utilization of this particular line look like? And if we look like underutilizing the line, he tried to kind of, and I'll never say right size again, but he tried to right size the line to reflect that. I do think it is challenging. So let's say one teacher equivalent is $130,000. I don't know how many teacher equivalents, if we're talking about the 15 people that the equivalents the council's talking about with 2.9, we'll find on the margins. But I think we should always be looking at those things and trying to, carve off stuff where we can.
I feel like I really want to ask this question. It might be a stupid question. For Infinite Campus, it is not, you guys have it on-prem. Is that right? Like it's installed on servers that are local in the district?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. It's somewhat of a hybrid environment. But yes, it is on-prem.
Okay. I'm sure that I just have to ask the question in terms of, do they have like a cloud-based option? Is there like an Infinite Campus and
They do.
yeah, and is there any, I mean, like, is that the only thing that's running on these servers? Like how much shared resources on this, yeah.
In this particular instance with Infinite Campus.
Yeah.
We have it on it's on a dedicated server. It's actually virtualized and all that sort of thing. But it's on a dedicated server. Infinite Campus actually does maintain the server, the actual hardware and such.
That we have.
Yeah, that we have, but it's hosted on site.
Okay.
We do that but we do host it on site because it gives us better access to our data, first of all, because we don't have to deal with any issues between us and Minnesota, which is where Infinite Campus is located. And it also gives us more control over the timing of updates to the product.
Sure.
Which actually can be very beneficial because there are certain things whenever we want to do some of these reports that go up to the state and everything, there's certain times that we want to run a report before we apply the next update. Or sometimes we say we absolutely have to have that next update to run this report or whatever. It also allows us to map out the time of when we get these updates so that like mid-year, the teachers aren't seeing a totally new interface. Because they do tend to change things. And of course, that's the nature of cloud-based software is they give you the update and it's, hey, it's new.
Yeah.
You know, which is fine, except that comes right in the middle of your grading season.
And report cards aren't going.
Report cards aren't going out
You
because.
can't find bots for midterm grades.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's why we host it on site. Yes.
Are there any softwares or licenses that, and I understand that it's not going to be the whatever 2% that we need, but like I know like Zoom went hugely up in cost. Like, are there things that we sort of be added pandemic wise that sounds like you've already looked at them, but I'm just curious if there's like things that have escalated in costs that like with another tool?
Yes. I mean, there certainly were. Zoom is a good example. You know, we were paying for a decent number of licenses. Of course, during the pandemic, there were a lot of things that were free too. But we were paying for a decent number of licenses. We took a hard look at that and scaled back the number of licenses that we use for Zoom. Obviously, we're on Zoom now, so it's not something that we want to say, oh, we're not going to use Zoom anymore, you know, completely, because it is still a useful tool. But you know, but we scaled back to the number of licenses that we thought was appropriate. Screencastify is another option or another example, excuse me, that you know, we had a good number of licenses, you know, more than what we need. So we're scaling that one back as well. You know, and we're going to continue to look at, obviously, as we're going through things to see what our usage is. You know, and on the flip side of that, also, we want to take advantage of some of the opportunities that the developers and vendors of these products have to make sure that we're fully utilizing the tool as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they do have, you know, training available. Some of it's even free and all that sort of thing. So if we can make better use of a tool, we're gonna go head down that road. Let's train the teachers to, and if we find out that tool actually does 2 or 3 different things that another tool, you know, that we have been using does, but now we can do it all over here. Hey, let's shift our workload over here and get rid of this other item over here.
Yeah, I want to mention, as you're talking about this, and it goes back to something Lisa said about nobody teaches the kids how to use Screencastify.
Yeah.
I
you know,
didn't pick on just that one.
No, I
It
know,
just
but it's
feels like
an example.
Using
Yeah.
it.
And we don't, one of the things that's been on again, off again conversation, I'm sure predated me, was the idea of dedicated tech integrationists within the district. And it's not in this budget, we're not asking for it. But it's definitely a capability that we're lacking at times. We know that that's a thing, and IT does a great job of trying to kind of manage that. And of course, over time, our staff is becoming increasingly digitally native kind of over time, but still with no dedicated person whose job is to exclusively work with, users around a deep dive of what some of these applications we're using. We probably don't get as much out of some of them as we could. Ideally, but that's not in this. I think knowing kind of what we're up against, that's not something you're not seeing the request for a dedicated tech integrationist as part of this proposal.
All right, can we get to the proposal?
Sure.
Thanks.
Just finishing up here. If we deployed this year, the rotation was again middle school music, art, CAD labs. So just a couple of quick things. So through the CIP portion, which isn't what we're discussing here, but just as a background, working with the city, we installed a vSAN node and wireless and some of the money for the high school wireless came from, CIP Capital Improvement Plan. The vSAN node, just so you know, is a virtual storage area network node. It's basically a server that, works with a number of other servers, to support a whole virtualized environment. Next year, we're again in CIP looking to expand, and replace more wireless, and some of our network switches. So the highlights for this year, again, I just put FY 25 up there, just as a look back, the labs and our high school and middle school one-to-one initiatives. Now, last year, the high school and middle school one-to-one initiatives were paid for, so all those Chromebooks were paid for out of federal funds, so the last year ESSER funds. So FY 26, as part of our rotation cycle, we go to the high school, teacher devices are next, in the rotation. They're working on, they're moving up on 5-year-old laptops. So it's time to replace those. And then, of course, the high school, middle school Chromebooks now, we can no longer pay for it, out of federal funds. So that's a big piece of what you see in here as an increase in, this FY 26 budget is those funds that we were, drawing from federal, and they're now in the local budget. The digital tool licensing, we consolidated some of that, but again, there were a number of digital tools that we were paying for out of the federal funds that are now being pulled into the. So those are two huge pieces of what you're seeing in here as far as an increase in technology funds. And then, of course, the third part is, or the last part is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is something that, is unfortunately a reality, a risk we are facing today in today's society. We address it in various pieces, some of which cost money and some of which do not. Ransomware, obviously, you guys have heard of that, I'm sure, is out there. I just went to the New Hampshire Cyber Defense meeting at the state level. And some of the new things that they were talking about, fortunately, is the phishing attacks are getting more sophisticated. We're starting to see AI being used to actually generate the emails that go out to tempt people to actually purchase, click on a link and download ransomware inadvertently. There are organizations, whole organizations out there that do ransomware as a service. They are basically businesses that sell you time on their servers, and will sell you the ransomware and all that sort of thing, and sell you a phishing attack that you can use to go after a particular organization or just multiple organizations. And if you happen to get the ransomware on there and all that sort of thing, they just ask for a cut of the profits from whatever you get. It does exist, and all that. Those are some of the things that we're up against. So we're dealing with a risk. And similar to other risks, it's really comes down to, do we want to, pay ahead of time to try and, avoid having these attacks succeed, or do we want to pay on the other end whenever they do succeed and now we have to recover from them? So those are kind of the things that we're up against. What we already do to address cybersecurity, we already pay for cyber boot training for everyone, all staff members in the district. They're short little clips, talk about the dangers of ransomware, the dangers of public Wi-Fi, things like that. They're less than 10 minutes to go through the whole thing, which seems to be very popular, I think, with the staff, because it's an awareness sort of a thing.
They don't love it.
Well, okay, yeah.
They're not like,
I shouldn't say that.
me, a cyber who's here today.
They like it better than an hour-long training.
Correct.
I should put it back.
I believe we get those as school board members, and I would be curious what our school board compliance rate is, because mine
I
is.
could look that up because
Actually, yeah.
mine is 0 every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I did not click on it because I didn't know what it was.
But they're very easy, short trainings, you know, and it raises an awareness, it's just so that, you know, if you're out somewhere and you got your school laptop and, oh, look, here's the open public Wi-Fi. I think I'll just connect to it
Yeah, no.
and start connecting up to, you know, Infinite Campus and looking at student information and all that. And now it's available for somebody to do a man-in-the-middle attack and pick up all that
Yeah.
student information and all those keystrokes that you just did. If we can train you not to do that, that's even better, because now we don't have all that student data out there in the wild.
The big thing in the corporate world is they have, the way they train is actually send phishing emails to you.
That's what we've done. We moved away from we've done still some videos.
And you have to watch a video.
Oh, well, this, we don't do that. We haven't done that yet, although,
We haven't done that yet.
but we will send you a training and say, this is an email, which parts of it are sketchy looking
Exactly.
and which parts are fine.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's pretty effective. That's a pretty
Very
effective tool for people.
You're like, oh, whoops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From the CEO, I better open it up quick.
Yeah, so other things that we do, we also, like the digital tools we were talking about earlier. Those, whenever somebody wants to use a new digital tool, you know, they are supposed to notify me, most of the time they do, hopefully. But anything that gets sent my way, I actually work with our New Hampshire consortium, and we vet all of those digital tools to make sure they don't have any cybersecurity issues, that they do actually protect the data, and things like that. Obviously, you saw we're tightening up on our passwords. We're using multi-factor authentication. We're you know, we obviously use endpoint protection, things like that. But the things that we're really kind of looking to do, and the reason why there's an additional ask in the budget, is to expand upon what we already do, to actually start to more actively monitor what we're doing. So we're looking to implement the endpoint, MDR, sorry, managed detection and response. MDR is the acronym for it, which is actually paying for an organization, a cybersecurity organization, to actually actively monitor what's going on in our environment, look for those anomalies, try and catch the ransomware if it does actually get in, catch it before it actually has a chance to deploy or infect too many machines. Make sure that it's not actually, you know, encrypting. You know, the earlier you can catch it, the less likely you are to fall prey to actually having to pay the ransom at the end. We're also looking to, in combination with that, again, kind of contract out with a security operations center, which sometimes it would be the same person, sometimes it would be two different organizations. But that's really what we're looking to do is up the bar a little bit, so that we make ourselves even a harder target. Because really that's the name of the game in cybersecurity, is you want to be a hard enough target that they go and try and find somebody else.
Go down the street.
Right.
Somebody in school. Oh, it's okay. Anyway.
Yeah.
Is like the endpoint management and the MDR. So is MDR a vendor or just like the general area of concern?
So MDR is a concept.
So like Netscope would be like an MDR. like-
Yeah,
that's-
exactly.
yeah.
Bitdefender can do it,
Okay.
CrowdStrike,
Yeah.
Arctic Wolf is another one.
Is that another area where there's opportunity with the city terms of cross collaboration. It seems like while obviously different organizations, different concerns, it seems like hardening would be beneficial across the city. regardless.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's beneficial across the board. That could potentially be an area
Yeah.
that we can work with the city.
Okay.
Yes, we have slightly different, obviously needs because we have
Yeah.
slightly different systems, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we couldn't use some of the same vendors for that, absolutely.
On the one-to-one Chromebooks, I know that you're gonna move, start recycling, I guess, whatever number through back in the local. Now that we see that uptick in the budget, is that gonna be more of a constant? Because it's just gonna roll over every year?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, basically what we do for that replacement cycle is we buy each incoming freshman class the Chromebooks, and then they keep them for the next 4 years, so that that batch of Chromebooks lasts the 4 years. And then, obviously we have to keep on
So
buying
this
it for the
increase that we're seeing
upcoming
kind
freshmen.
of stay in the budget for
Yeah,
As a big,
Yeah,
as a
as-
big number would, that would stabilize, and then whatever the ongoing comes. Year to year increases, but this is a structural change in.
yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
On within the budget, there's sort of so the big drivers on the 177 budget are 70.
I don't think we're there yet, Carrie. He's got a whole.
oh,
I-
no,
Yeah,
I think-
mindset.
I think it's appropriate right now.
no, you,
Is the cybersecurity initiatives. And then on the software piece, I just want to clarify the online subscriptions move from federal funds. So are those, it's like Frontline, Luminex, are those all online subscriptions?
Is that like we've already had or
so yeah, so you're in,
like, I'm guessing,
77, yeah, 2210 90 734. So. Oh, no, wrong one. 40 90. Okay,
we're two.
yep. So 0642. So you're talking about like the Frontline, Max, Google Workspace. Is that what you're looking
Yeah,
at?
is that this digital tool license consolidation?
That is, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and I should mention, I'm sorry, I should mention along in the digital tool world that the Google Workspace for Education Plus is actually that's a new line item, and we haven't actually had to pay for Google because we've been running off of the free education version for many years, yay. But as suspected, eventually capabilities, and we eventually this year we reached the point where in order to actually effectively use Google Classroom, which our teachers heavily use, we have to pay for the upgraded version, which is why that,
Which is minimal really for,
yeah, for what we use Google for, yeah, it's really kind of a small cost.
Liz,
The sorry, I just lost my train of thought here, but I'll go back to I'll figure out what I was gonna ask before this, but I just had an idea though, as far as the Infinite Campus, my understanding with, you said that we have a server, a dedicated server or hard drive here for Infinite Campus.
Yep.
My understanding with data now is that a lot of softwares are moving to online because they are more secure. You're not hosting something that could be, you're not holding something with everybody's data in it that could be essentially hacked into versus the more of a cloud-based. And so I guess I wondered if Infinite Campus is the end all be all here, because like I just recently heard from my physical therapist that his kids use Google to get all their grade updates, and it sounded very similar to Infinite Campus. So I guess I wonder if Google has a mechanism similar to Infinite Campus, or if there's other mechanisms out there that may be more beneficial or cost effective or secure, so to speak.
Well, two things on that. One is that, so Google is totally different than Infinite Campus. Infinite Campus is a student information.
No, I know. He was
Yes,
saying that there is a way, like he's seeing all of his kids' grades through some sort of Google like some other platform that's not Infinite Campus. Like there's an app he's logging into and he's seeing grades. And so I don't know if it's, through Google Classroom, like there's grades that update on there and teachers can update. And I know some teachers don't. So I do think it's not being fully utilized for that in that regard. And so I wonder if we're sort of duplicating, although I think Infinite Campus is great, I do somewhat wonder if we're duplicating efforts because Google has this built-in ability to hold grades.
Well, so the Google Classroom, you can enter grades. A teacher can enter grades in for the classroom and all that sort of thing. And a parent should be able to go in and look in the Google Classroom. They have access to it to see
Yeah.
what the current grade is and all that. Or a student cannot obviously log in, show the parent, this is what the grade is that I have. That's really at a classroom level. Then those grades actually are, either entered or uploaded into an campus. Infinite Campus is the student information system. That's the database of record, and that's where the actual report card is actually generated, and that's where the eventually at high school level the class rank, and then eventually the transcripts that go on to college. Those are all held actually in Infinite Campus. Google does not have the capability to act as a long-term.
Yeah, I mean,
system.
I don't know. I guess I know Berwick's, I don't think Berwick's using it. Summersworth, I have a friend there. They're using some other method. So I guess I was curious if we're hosting we have a hard drive where we're hosting all of our student data, which may not be as secure as some other platform. I guess I'm curious just long term, especially as the costs increase, if maybe there's something better out there. I do realize my other question.
Really, really quickly, so there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
I think is important to explain.
Yeah.
So one component of our student information system is the ability to track grades, generate grades, do all that stuff. It also is the kind of the repository for all of our student data and family data, attendance data, what buses are kids on, who are your emergency contacts, what's your behavioral record over the course of your entire time in the school system. Student information systems are extremely robust, and the grade component of student information systems are one sliver of what they do.
No, I totally get
So,
that.
So it could be that you can see in Classroom grades, but Google doesn't have the ability to use that data across multiple different ways in which we utilize that. I mean, if we're going to move away from Infinite Campus, it's companies like Our School got hacked, actually.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Alma, which the state is kind of moving to as a preferred vendor. There are other of these companies. If we were to do that, that is probably a 2-year process of us migrating that data, training people, doing all that work. And we talk about it from time to time. The state made a hard push on Alma. But that is the type of thing that kind of organizationally, the bandwidth of everybody in the organization would be sucked up with that project for probably a 2-year stretch. I don't anticipate that we're going to move in that direction in the next couple of years. That would have been part of strategic planning if we're going to move in that way. So anyways, I just want to put that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned with the fact that we're sort of in-housing that unit, and what is the security risk of having all of that data?
Yeah, so the data is here. It's also backed up by Infinite Campus in Minnesota as well.
Okay.
So it is a hybrid solution. So if something were to happen to our server here, we would contact Infinite Campus and say, hey, we got a problem. They would actually spin up actually in this case, they could spin up the virtual machine in their cloud and keep us running, and we would just pick up where we left off.
Okay.
Just running on their servers instead of ours.
I remember my next question. So, we're listing leases. So are we not buying these units and we're leasing all of the units that we have in-house, and what's going to be the cost difference?
So, okay, so that's a good question. So, what we do with our long-term replacement cycle is, in order to eliminate the peaks and valleys of various replacements, we've gone to a leasing model. And what we do is we do a 3-year lease with a $1 buyout. And that's how we structure all of our all of our leases. So for example, this year, the high school teachers, we have a whole lot more high school teachers than we do, let's say, at the middle school or the elementaries. So the number of laptops that we're buying for high school teachers is going to be pretty significant cost. If we were to buy those all outright this year, you know, I could be coming to you asking for, you know, I don't know, $300,000 just for that. And then next year we come to, I forget who's next, but I could be asking you for, you know, 50,000. You know, we don't want to do that because every year the number would look completely different. In order to level everything off, what we do is we put it into a rolling 3-year leases. So I have it structured very carefully and so that we keep that hardware cost relatively even over the course of the 5-year replacement cycle. Yes.
Question, so you said it's a 3-year lease with a $1 buyout.
Yeah.
What happens with the buyout?
So we own the equipment.
We
when it's
own it.
done,
Where
yes.
does that go after the 3-year?
Okay, so we just keep that. So for example, the high school.
But would that stay with the teacher?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It stays right with the teachers. Yeah.
So every 3 years, we're not really leasing them new equipment.
Right,
We're
right,
mortgaging.
right.
We're mortgaging.
Yeah, if you want to look at it that way. We're mortgaging and keeping, exactly. For the last 2 years, we own the devices and we don't pay anything on it.
So how long would a teacher keep said device?
So we're on a 5-year,
Average.
a 5-year replacement
Okay.
cycle. So actually, I think I have a slide for that. Here you go. So for example, this year would be year 1 of the high school classrooms, and you'll see PHS and PMS 1-to-1. Those are the Chromebooks. They're new purchase every year. But so the high school classrooms would be this year. Next year, we would be replacing the high school labs. When we go to the year 3, it's the middle school classrooms, and year 4 is the elementary classrooms and food services. And then year 5, we're back up to the middle school labs, and then we would just go back and start the high school classrooms again. And we just keep on rotating through those so that all of our machines that the teachers and students are using essentially are within that 5-year range.
I have another question.
Sure.
Sorry. So if we are using them for 5 years, is it only a 3-year lease? Or if we leased it for 5 years, would our yearly lease cost be less?
So we do it for 3 years, but we have overlapping leases. So for example, the high school, we're going to be paying for this for year 1, year 2, and year 3. So by the time we reach year 4 with the elementary classrooms here, the high school lease is done.
Okay,
It's
so
paid off
those 2 years of not paying any lease for the high
for the
school.
high school.
Okay,
And at that point, we're paying for the high school labs and the middle school labs. So whatever we're paying for off of those leases, now we're going to add the elementary classroom leases. And then the next year,
okay.
whatever it is, the high school labs are going to roll off the leases, and then we can start picking up the middle school labs.
God bless
and
you
adding
keeping
those.
all that in your head.
So, yeah. So, it took a number of years to get to this point where all of this kind of adds up so that, you know, yes, we know that, let's see, I think it's a 40-something thousand lease.
47.5, you know? 47,000.
Yeah, 47,580 is what we're gonna be spending on the high school lease for this year. But I know that when that rolls off in 3 years, I've got, you know, that 47,800 is gonna roll to, you know, the elementaries and the food services, because that's gonna take up that.
Smooths up the cost.
So it keeps it relatively even. It's not perfectly even, but it's as even as we can get across the years. Yes.
So I feel like more and more students are having their own laptops, especially with gaming laptops now.
Mhm.
And obviously there's like a security, and there's a risk in having a child having their own laptop, but I wonder, you know, as time goes on and parents buy these things for their children, you know, especially at the high school level, could there be a benefit I mean, a cost benefit to the system itself or to the city to figure out a way that to have students be able to use their own laptops? Are there students now that are using their own laptops?
So yes, some students do bring in their own laptops. Yes, it is a cybersecurity risk, for them to do that. So honestly, if a student brings in a laptop that is infected with malware, we could get the malware. Yeah,
How so?
it's restricted, but we could have the malware spread within our district. There is that potential for it to happen. You know, we certainly protect ourselves from that as much as we possibly can. You know, but it could happen. If that does happen, then it becomes a big issue as well, because ultimately, and this is something that you know, we're actually kind of in the process of taking a look at is personal devices and you know, what we do, reassessing what we do want to allow, what we don't want to allow. We run the very potential real risk, and this is actually one of the things that came up in our cyber security event the other day, is that if there were actually a ransomware kind of a malware event, there's a potential that the folks who come in and clean it all up would be asking for personal devices and saying, hey, I'm sorry, but I have to wipe your device because, you know, you were connected to the system and now you have malware on your device and we can't allow you to bring that back into the system. So
But-
it gets into kind of a bit of a gray area.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious. I mean, obviously you're monitoring, I guess when you say the system, it's the system of monitoring, but of what students are doing on their laptops, right? Because like I know for my son, and I think for many other students, children are accessing their Google school accounts from home.
Yes.
So beyond that, though, I guess it's the monitoring software that you're talking about?
Well, no, I mean, I'm talking about the
Yeah.
risk of somebody bringing something inside our network, affecting other inside the network. Yes, students and, you know, and faculty, you know, can access their accounts. I mean, Google is a cloud-based
Yeah.
account, so you can access it from home and from a different machine and all that sort of thing. But we really have to kind of think about, you know, less so from a student perspective, but more from a staff perspective. How are the staff accessing those accounts? You know, what are they actually doing on a home machine? You know, do you want to have, how much do you want them working on student information on a home machine?
No, I can understand
You know,
staff having a school one, but having children have them,
And where the children come in, as far as like the Chromebooks.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of the crux of this. Our a good, especially at the high school level and such, a good number of the tests and assessments and things like that teachers do require a school-owned Chromebook to run the test, because they run it in kind of more of a lockdown mode, and all that sort of thing. So that's definitely where they're used heavily.
I think most systems, most school systems are becoming, if anything, more restrictive on BYOD, bring your own device scenarios, as time goes on, because I mean, I remember I sat in with the Nashua superintendent, talking through in the fall. He presented and talked about Nashua's ransomware attack, and it was terrifying to think about the fact that they had no access to anything, and how much it costs them to buy back out of that, how much they're investing. Your 77K around security is a pittance compared to what Nashua is now, you know, doing to make sure they have around the clock monitoring of all their systems and all that type of stuff, as a result of being in this scenario where we will never do this again. This will never happen to us again. And so coming back to a lot of places looking at BYOD, like it's just not worth the risk. Also, it's also harder, you know, you can't maintain those laptops. It's harder for us to maintain. If a student has an issue,
Right.
a home-based laptop, they're not, it's difficult for them to come down to IT to have that taken care of, or for us to assess what the issue is and then push it back out. But if there's our own stuff, we can, you know, remotely assess anything that's kind of software based and probably push out an issue. And if it's hardware based, we're using the same stuff and we can make those changes, and we have guys in house
Place
to do that
repair,
work. Yeah.
everything, yeah. Those are all the slides I have. so.
I guess I'll ask a question. So Tom, if I look at the last page of 177, last year it was 904,000, and this year it's 1,000,002. Is that as of ESSER funds drying up?
So,
It looks like you're missing a highlight, Nancy. So there's all the additions are highlighted besides the first page, that 72,000 MDR cybersecurity
I'm looking at
initiative
the
under
total,
the 0310.
Yeah, okay.
the total was last year was
900,000 to 1.2.
900 to 1.2.
yeah, so that,
That's-
yeah, that comes down to, it's primarily ESSER and then the 72,000 for cybersecurity.
But yeah, the primary, it's the. Yeah.
But
things that we were,
the vast majority of it is.
Most of
ESSER.
that's it.
ESSER, yeah.
Okay. And then the next one under data, it didn't go up that much.
Data is the same, and actually 136 media stays the
Oh,
same
yeah.
as well.
166 sealed. Okay. Really just that 177.
Yeah. Yeah, I was all able to hold the other two where they were, but I definitely want to ask for an increase there. 'Cause I think this one's an increase, so. Gonna balance everything out.
What is the front line?
Frontline?
Yeah.
Oh, frontline is our it's our employee staff management system.
Teacher evaluations, teacher
evaluations.
professional development, so that they can count their hours for recertification, absences, being able to hold, it's like teacher information system to get contact information. Our recruiting and hiring goes through there.
Is it like an HR type program?
Piece of it,
Yeah,
yeah.
HR light, we'll call it, yeah.
And that was moved, is that, so are those the online subscriptions listed under? It says online subscriptions moved from federal funds, those three are.
That was the question I asked,
Those, yeah, those are like those are the key ones that
Okay.
that moved over. There's probably another one or two small ones, but I don't think I called it out specifically.
One other security question, which is a little bit of a wild card right now, but we're seeing a lot of questions in Washington about what types of data we might have access to, whether or not we'll say keep the Department of Education or not, all these other things. Are there any costs that we're anticipating around just trying to safeguard our records, or is there anything else that we would maybe potentially have to do depending on, what happens with how information is kept, or what information we may or may not want to share about our kids with, people in DC? I guess I'm just curious if there's any added concerns around that. I mean, it's very soon and premature to even have any clue what's really going to come down the pike. It seems to change by the hour, but I guess I'm just curious if there's anything that you're watching on that front right now. Wait.
I would honestly, I would say I don't have enough information.
Nobody
at this
does.
point
It's-
to really even know how to answer
Okay,
that,
fair.
what we're anticipating yet.
I think it's hard. I mean, like, I think about in your presentation, the thing that, one of the things that came to mind might be like just gone. Might be.
Yep.
Civil rights, data collection might
Yep.
be just gone. They might just be like, no, we're not interested in.
Yeah.
Now that, I mean, all that information that we collect, it's around attendance, it's around discipline, it's around all these things. It looks across grades, it looks at all kinds of different groups to look at trends and whether or not we are disciplining kids of color at a higher rate than other students. Are we, just a variety of different things that then in aggregate gets pushed up to the feds, and we typically do every 2 years. It's a big lift. That's a labor intensive project. I think I believe in what we're collectively trying to do as a national community, and then what we do with that information when it comes back to us. But I could see that being something that's just like just
Need that,
lopped off,
yep.
just gone.
Yep.
Now that if anything, This wasn't where your question was going, but that might create additional efficiencies for us in terms of that project being something that then frees us up to do other things that we want to be doing. But it's really hard to tell
Yeah.
what's gonna happen with some of the, I mean, the stuff I'm reading today and what supposedly may be announced tomorrow, but then it's really not carefully constructed. It's really hard to tell where we're going and what that might mean. For us, but I would assume. Yeah, I'm not gonna assume anything because I think, Tom, I don't have enough information. I don't have enough tangible information to know what to respond to.
That's fair.
Liz.
So it looks like under the 3 cost centers, there's 7 staff, including yourself.
Mhm.
And so I guess I was curious where each staff is located. Or like what their roles are through the department.
Actually, you're gonna have an answer from.
We can use this. Tom can be our guinea pig.
Perfect.
For this,
One media.
and I'll get you a digital, I'll get you a link for people who want a link. But this is.
Data and then 5.
Sorry, you don't have to touch the paper if you don't touch the paper. I got a
Yeah.
visual version coming shortly. So what you have in this, and we'll go to Tom's, and Tom's got a copy, but then we can take a peek at it. So this is the hierarchical, not hierarchical, the organizational chart of the district. If you're looking for Tom's stuff, let's see where Tom is. Page 5. Page 5.
Yeah.
Um,
A nice color photo.
and there is,
I didn't get the photo version.
no, this is different. Yeah, so Tom and the folks underneath Tom are, at least most of the folks underneath Tom, you'll find here on page 5. The yellow, just in terms of a couple things really quick with this group. The yellow color codes, that's around location. So the folks in yellow are stationed primarily at the high school. They move between buildings at times. And then, and I don't know if you agree with Mike, Tony is a purple, but Tony is a primarily
His
middle school
office.
station. Yeah, where he's where he is.
Yeah.
So that's, and we can talk more as we move through. But anyways, that's Tom's folks. And then they're, you can see them within his budget book section as well.
All of them, yes, Carrie, photos have costumes.
There are not. So we had one, as we were turning to page 5, I was like, it's unfortunate we have one of the only costumes in the entire joint, and it's on page 5.
I would like that to be required.
Oh,
Yeah.
we had,
What can I say?
there was
Like I
one
said,
costume photo somewhere else in the district last year, but,
Oh my gosh, I look.
Oh,
so-
like, I had-
So,
so
wow.
I have a couple, and this is, so I noticed the cost, like, on Bayring is stable. But it ends up being a large cost in general.
Yes.
I've heard of other Bayring clients getting like huge increases. Is that something we've
So is
already
that,
experienced or?
is it Mayray still? No.
We might have to make it a tweak.
Well, yeah, we should tweak that.
Yeah,
It's
we
not
should.
Mayray anymore.
Okay, great.
So, I mean, it's First Light is who actually does it. Yeah.
Where,
So, no, that's the right amount, but,
The data lines.
yeah, for our data line. So basically that pays for, it mostly pays for our internet connection and is prorated across the buildings. In some cases, at least for the RJLA, it pays for the actual data line between RJLA and City Hall, but for most of it, it pays for our internet connection. And it's prorated. Yes, we actually do reassess and reevaluate that contract every couple of years. And we go out to bid. We actually, that's part of, that's one of the few items actually that E-rate will reimburse us for. E-rate, the E-rate program. which is a
So-
federal program run by the through the FCC and USAC. And reimbursed for like internet connections, data connections, and for some districts, it's also, different technology items, and things like that. Usually more.
And it used to be, I mean, it went all the way back to like phone stuff.
It used to be
And then
phones as well,
It was like
right?
library stuff, but it's really moved more, for most places, more and more towards kind of network
Yes,
based stuff.
yeah, it has.
Yeah.
Then that was a separate, so I uncovered the truth that Bay Ring is no.
So yeah, it's not Bay Ring. Actually, Bay Ring got bought out by Oxford Networks, which got bought out by First Light.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, currently,
I worked for an employer that had like exponential costs through them, so
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
small little thing.
so yeah.
On the, so we had just went through like a redistricting process. And I think that there's some database enrollment sort of changes that we'd like to possibly see to help with ongoing monitoring. Is that something that would be internal? Like, so for instance, geolocation on addresses, is that in your department?
If it's something that we can maintain in Infinite Campus, then yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if we can maintain it inside our student information database.
I have a question.
But I'm not the best person to answer that question. That's why I have Mike and Carly. Because they'll be all over that, tell you what can and can't be done, where we would reside in the database, how we can run reports.
Oh, well, you came to the wrong place, because we have two people who've been living in database land on our data for months, so.
Maybe this can come back from Mike or Carly. I guess the question I have is. So Infocampus is the database record.
Mhm.
So there isn't like a different database instance somewhere else. It's like when they're pulling information from, sorry, it's from Infinite Campus, right?
If you're talking about student information, yeah,
Okay.
it's coming from there.
And do you all maintain? Sorry.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
but when we, in order to push it up, in order to take that information and then push it up to the state,
Okay,
if that's where we're going.
No.
Okay, never mind, you keep going.
okay.
Because there's a process, it's not an instantaneous file load,
Right.
there's massaging of data that has to happen and put into that I4C system that Tom was talking about. Now they're moving to index, so it's not a click and go, but go.
The question was about like historic records. So if we're interested in like enrollment trends over time, do you know if Infinite Campus is maintaining like year over year, like archive in terms of, or is it just like the state of the world is the state of the world in terms of like that database?
Oh, you mean like,
census,
so can we go back 10 years and say how many kids were enrolled at the high school 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Or it would be like by neighborhood.
By neighborhood, I don't know, because for something like for us to draw
So
from
we
it.
need the geolocation.
So like,
Sorry, we're way off of the budget.
it's okay, but I know what you're talking about. If it's something that we wanted to start tracking now,
Yes.
yes, we could enter it in and find a field for it and all that sort of thing. I'm going to assume so, but I'd have to talk to Mike and Carly and make sure. Okay, they're the experts, but it doesn't mean that we can go back, if we just create the fields today,
Okay.
that doesn't mean that it's gonna have any effect 10 years ago.
They want to know who's living in every house in Portsmouth.
No, that's Nancy. That's what Nancy wants.
Nancy already knows that.
Nancy does know that.
Liz,
I guess, I think this is a hard question. I'm not sure exactly how to ask it, so it's not gonna be eloquent. And I think it's gonna be a hard question to answer, but a lot of tech now, it seems like there's a lot of outsourcing of, you're outsourcing some security stuff, you're outsourcing, there's a lot of software. There's a lot of programs and whatnot. So with that said, I assume that over time we've never kind of looked at it and said, hey, is there an opportunity here to potentially cut staff? And so I think it's obviously a hard question to ask you, because you don't want to be put on the spot and say whether you want to cut staff or not. But I guess you know, maybe there's a bigger question to ask of the superintendent if we're being requested by the city to drop our budget down, yet we need $72,000 to run, you know, outside cybersecurity measures and whatnot. We have, you know, 7 folks at the high school, 1 at the middle school. You know, are we at a point potentially where, you know, we may not need that many staff to be running the systems that we're running if a lot of it is, you know, software based, or outsourced, where we're at. And I guess maybe it's not a question that obviously I don't want you to be put on the spot to answer that, unless you feel comfortable answering it, but, you know, I assume you're gonna advocate for your people there. But I think I do wonder if this is a potential, you know, crunch point of, you know, do we need all of these folks at the high school?
Seeing all those folks at high school.
Well, I'm looking at the chart and there's 8 total staff, including Tom, within these cost centers. And so I'm asking a bigger question of whether, you know,
Yeah.
is there an opportunity to eliminate a staff member to save in this cost center? Because I think we're being asked those questions
Yeah.
by the city.
I think it's appropriate to kick the tires on those types of questions. So Tom, can you, just in terms of putting it in context?
Yeah.
When you think about kind of the IT environment and the number of users we have and the staff we have to service those users, how, for people to kind of contextualize, whether it's in a nonprofit space, a school space, or in a business space, what would be typical of the kind of, you know, of staffing similar to what we have? Is it in line, out of line? Is it less than what places have, more than what places have? How do big folks think about that?
Yeah. So, okay, so just to clarify one thing here, everybody who is in the IT department is really a district wide district level employee. The color coding is great because it places our offices are primarily
Yeah, I
high
get that.
school, and except for Tony, who his office is at middle school. So, you know, it's not like we only support the high school. So just kind of put that in context. So as far as like staffing levels, you know, we're compared to the number of endpoint users that they support in a corporation, we're way understaffed. There's no corporation of this size that we would be running with this few number of IT staff. So, you know, their technician or or technical staff to user ratio is definitely much lower than what we have. But you know, as far as compared to other schools and such, I think we actually, you know, we're doing okay, I would say. You know, there are other districts, and you know, if you go anywhere in New Hampshire, you gotta find other districts that some of them are worse off as far as the number of staff they have, and some of them are better off. But I will say that as far as like outsourcing and everything is concerned, there are certain things that strategically we can outsource, and there are certain things that strategically we can't. That is much more difficult. I will say that, you know, the city of Portsmouth for quite a while actually ran under a model of outsourcing most of what they did. And they found after that was actually really challenging, and didn't provide the support to their users that they really needed. So they actually have been working on slowly building up the size of our IT department in the city to bring some of those resources back in. Doesn't mean that they don't outsource some things, they certainly do. You know, and we certainly do whenever we find that it's going to be more useful to us as an organization.
Can you give a couple examples of things that lend themselves well to both in terms of efficiency and effectiveness to pushing out to a third party? What are the things that really in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, really, we found are better in-house.
Okay, so things like, well, pushing out to an outside resource. So obviously the cybersecurity that I'm talking about. Because what we're looking to do with this cybersecurity is to actually provide 24/7 monitoring for our environment. We would have to add quite a number of staff in order to actually do that. It's just not cost effective to do. So that's a clear winner for
Yeah.
outsourcing.
So a third party could have the economies of scale to address a whole bunch of different
Absolutely.
people.
They're monitoring a
They've got
slew of
a big
organizations.
bunch of people and they're on all night.
Yeah.
Different people are rotating in and out and.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
Infinite Campus is another one that, yes, we have database administrators that manage the system for us. However, all the backups and everything that happen for Infinite Campus, that's managed by Infinite Campus. That part is outsourced to them. The desktop support actually, talking to teachers and users and the students and all that sort of thing, taking a Chromebook and repairing it and that those are things that we do in-house, especially that human interaction, the teachers and the students. That's where we really we have to have the people on site because it would be difficult and near impossible to try and support let's say all the students with an outsourced environment. It would just be very, very difficult to do that. So those are the kind of the trade-offs that we do. Like our database administrators, we have them in-house because we do a lot of customization with our student information system. If we want to add a field, it's going to be geolocation or whatever. That's something that we would have to do in-house. So those are the trade-offs that we have. We've actually moved further and further over the years away from, like, we've reduced the number of people who fall into specifically a technician role. We're actually down to two computer technicians who actually are the ones who are the outward face of dealing with a particular laptop and all that sort of thing. And we've moved more and more towards the back-end management of things. You can see we have actually 2 system administrators and 2 database administrators so that we can do more things like, wouldn't that be great if we can set up a laptop, push all the updates out to it through Intune or through Unite or something like that, so that you get all the updates rather than saying, oh, now we need to have 10 technicians that need to go out there and
I remember
actually
those days of coming around and
the
saying,
machine and make the updates.
Yeah.
and Jimmy and Steve are gonna cycle through the district and re-image everything. And
Yeah.
all right, it's gonna take us 2 months.
So those are the types of things that we do. And then, of course, we have a media technician, one media technician for it. Everything that happens in the district, any play, any presentation, anything that happens at all, that's our guy. He goes out, he's there, he takes care of it, sets up the sound system. If it's a projector or whatever. He was in here earlier, actually helping me set up the desktop that we have, the little mini that's back there and all that. So, yeah. So
Are they, I know they're one FTE. Did they work year round? Do some work year round?
actually all of them are year round.
Okay.
Okay, are there any more questions for Tom? I have a question about the chart. Okay, we're gonna get into that next, right?
Yeah, I can, if it's specifically about Tom's piece of the chart, we can do that. And if not, then I'm happy to share and talk broadly about how to interpret the chart. Can kind of give you the 101 on how to interpret the chart.
Super simple. So this appears as 7 direct reports or,
Yeah,
7 direct reports.
okay.
that's correct. Yeah.
So
And a
the
shared administrative assistant.
database administrator, the assistant database administrator does not report to the database administrator.
No, they work together. Absolutely, 100%, but yeah.
That's where we're just the first one to
Yeah,
this in front of us.
good question. Yeah.
Well, thank you. You're welcome to
Yeah.
stay if you would like to hear how this chart. Okay.
You're also welcome to leave So,
Oh, well, the wind is calm, maybe. No, the wind.
We will come up with more questions if you stay, so.
so let me, if it's okay, let me use time to, I'll share in a second. I'll kind of walk you through some pieces of the chart, just how to interpret and understand what it's trying to communicate to you. And then, you know, I'd love to take a, once we answer those questions, love to get any feedback on that. The question I introduced at the beginning, which was, what are the types of information you feel like you need? So as we think about curating the workshops, that we're bringing in the right people, or front loading the right stuff. We're getting you, what you need. So let me first see if I can get in and share my screen.
Is there any way we can know what their salaries are?
Those are in the budget book. They're not, they don't appear on the chart. We use this as an operational chart. So we don't, we have a bunch of different people in the organization. We push this out
Thank
to,
you.
so we don't,
We don't have salaries.
we don't have like, yeah, here's how much that guy down the hallway makes. Although it's available, I mean, people can find something. So if you.
Thank you.
Thanks a bunch, Tom. Appreciate it. Share, yeah. Okay, so I introduced this tool, I brought this in my first year. We've been slowly kind of building the tail end of my first year, I think. We started playing with it. And this is Organini. And so you have a paper version of this, but it basically lays out kind of across the system who's reporting to who. And the other element we tried to add most recently is unique funding sources connected to people. So and I'll give you an example. Let me go really quickly to, let's go to high school. Or no, let's go to the food program. So if I go underneath Brian in the business office, so let me expand that a little bit. So under Brian, you've got several different units underneath his umbrella, and one of those is school nutrition. Under here, what you'll see is you've got one, a little hard to see, but it's one supervisor and 26 other folks. So then you have Deb Rizzo, who's our lead person in food nutrition, director of food nutrition.
Yep.
So what you'll see here, which in a lot of other places won't happen, you have Deb. Let me expand her a little bit. So in this case, well, let's go back to Brian for a second. So with Brian, you got Brian, and then his role, business administrator, and no additional information for Brian. But when you get to Deb, who is a direct report, you have Deb, school nutrition, and then underneath her food. Now that is not trying to say, hey, you probably don't understand that school nutrition is food. What that is a funding source. So everything that happens inside of the food program is a self-contained unit, and all the money cycles inside of it and pays for itself. So what you'll see with all the people in this category of school nutrition is underneath each one of them, you'll see food, which just lets you know that this is not, we'll call, I will use interchangeably two things while we're talking through the budget. I will sometimes refer to things as Fund 11, and other times, most of the time, I'm just going to refer to it as local budget. And local budget is what are the things that through the direct taxation of people in Portsmouth are you paying for? Now, in the past, you have not seen some of these folks who are being paid for from other sources. It's not been part of our budget conversation. But what we wanted to do is kind of expand out. And I think sometimes, one of the best examples of this is like, Listers. But where's Lister? Well, Lister is paid for through another source. So you'll see food. I'm trying to think of another example.
What's Fund 11?
So Fund 11 is that local taxpayer dollars. Now, if somebody's Fund 11, because the vast majority of people are Fund 11, they won't have any special listing underneath them.
Okay.
New Franklin helps. Oh, yeah, that helps. Yeah, thanks. So if I go to New Franklin, you've got Joanne and you got Kim Kump, who's the assistant to the principal. But if I look at the support services, for example.
What page is showing?
Oh, sorry, I was right. Sorry, I'm in digital land.
Oh, page
15,
50.
Carrie, I want to get to support services.
Yes, 50.
Is that by
Yep, page 50.
I said what I said.
Awesome, you're on it. So if I go to support services at New Franklin and I look at this group, you'll see like Alyssa Brown, who is a school counselor, and nothing under her because she is paid for through Fund 11, which is the local Portsmouth taxpayers. But then you have a variety of other people who are paid through some other sources. So you have, Vonda Cunningham, who's a literacy tutor. She's paid through Title I federal program. Same thing with Joan Conforti. So you'll see these people who are paid through other ways. as part of-
207, is that another one?
So 207 is tuition, is primarily made up of tuition dollars from SAU 50 that are redistributed throughout the system. Traditionally, that, and we won't tell a whole story about 207 because that's evolved over time. There was a time where 207 was, it was a combination of regular student tuition plus sped dollars that were paid for students from SAU 50 at the end of the year. At some point back in time, and I'll try to find the year for you, that mushed into a singular tuition payment, except for students from those communities who were sent to out-of-district placements. And then, so if you're an out-of-district placement kid from Greenland, you show up in SAU 50's budget separately from us. So you'll see Title I, you'll see 207.
Wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before you leave that one.
Yeah, let me go back to support services.
Sorry. Emma needs a external code, by the way, but the support, so this doesn't have a supervisor, right? Or so does Joanne supervise all of
So
this?
these folks are directly supervised by Joanne.
Okay, what about like counseling and nurse? Those,
So same thing, so like Alyssa Brown's in here, who's a counselor, Todd Fiore's in here as a counselor, Karen Uckard is in here as a nurse. Those are all directly supervised by the building principal. There's
206.
no in-between middle manager with those folks.
there's no clinical supervision?
There's no, nope. And so one of the things we've talked about is in terms of our long-term, again, we're not offering that, but we're not putting it in here this year because of the constraints.
I remember it came up.
But we've talked about a directive guidance being something that we're interested in, that would be a K-12 vertical person, because really in a lot of cases, our counseling staff are good, they're talented folks, but a lot of them are operating, we don't have a K-12 counseling system philosophy kind of approach. There's a lot of things that people are doing that are consistent across schools, but that is more by, this is a gross generalization, but more by chance than by design sometimes.
Gotcha.
And so we'd love to move, as we think about social emotional kind of needs of students, to having it be more systemic, the way we approach school counseling, and add somebody who's part of overseeing and make sure that happens. We're not asking for that in this particular cycle because of the constraints. So
On that, if there is more integration with external health services, that might be a clinical integrate, like that position might be well poised to do that.
do some of that work. Yeah, no, agreed. We know it's a need. We just don't feel like we're in a position to address it really.
The last budget cycle was my first one, and that was, she's understand a lot. So. But I'm remembering conversations around paras and special educators.
Yep.
Being shared across elementary schools. Am I misremembering? There is a
Generally, you don't, not the paras, you don't have, I'm trying to think if there's any paras I can think of that we would cross over schools.
Nobody
I
would
don't
be
think so.
across schools, no.
None of our,
Some of the occupational therapy,
Yeah.
speech, physical therapy might be in multiple locations because the caseloads are smaller.
Okay.
and I
So
can,
you can stretch them.
so this would be, and can really get to those folks really quick. Like,
Oh.
Okay, so maybe like.
Oh.
so if I go to Rick, who's well, there's really this thing in my way. So if I go to Rick and then I look at multi-school folks underneath Rick, you know, Rick's got, and we're still, sometimes there's a few people where we've got them stationed in particular buildings, but for the most part, we're trying to have them live here. So these are some of those support people that cross over buildings. And are, and almost all these folks have at least 2 buildings that they're associated with.
Mhm.
And like Bill Douglas is down the corner who does adaptive fees and
Everywhere.
every building in the district.
It'd be helpful in the, so for like, Eric, for example.
Yep.
In funding source, you have 207 and local 50.
Yes.
Is there any way in the software there can be just a little more descriptive of 207? Like, I don't know if there's something you can just do, so like when I'm reading this, I know without having to know what 207 means, just like.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is the 207's got a tab. Anyway. But it's tuition and fees. And so I could just label it as tuition and fees, but it's like I said, primarily SAU 50 tuition, but it's also, there's some other stuff that goes into that bucket. So I'm referring to the bucket.
Yeah.
But the bucket is primarily SAU 50 tuition.
That's called Fund 207.
Fund 207. So I could call it, I mean, on this tab, Brian refers to as tuition and fees. I could lose all the 207s and just have it listed as tuition and fees, which will somewhat address, you know what I mean? It kind of covers it, but it kind of doesn't, is the. Yeah,
Are there any other funds besides 11, 207 and Title I?
11, 207,
206,
206.
what's 206?
206
Lister?
is Lister.
And then CASIT grant?
Is the,
Italian.
the Italian was the Italian consulate, which has been transferred to third-party nonprofit, who's an extension basically of the consulate, who is
Love the example.
it's a US-based group who both takes money from the Italian government and raises money themselves. But anyway, so that's CASIT.
CAS.
IT.
It's capital CAS, little I, big T.
Okay, that's the Italian.
That's the Italian money.
Okay, Carrie has a question.
This just really hit me what this is. So I just
Yeah.
need to repeat it.
Yep.
Because I have heard this said and I feel like now I'm like holding impact. So.
Yeah.
So 20, whatever,
207.
207.
207
Yeah.
has. A lot of it.
A lot of errors.
A lot of paras, but so 43 point, or 43 to 48, it looks like, anyway, whatever. So $2 million, or if I'm interpreting this right, $2 million of our staff, we have never seen before in our budget.
And I'll tell you that this has been a thing. When I came in, this has been something through 2 business managers. This has been the approach, and something that I've been uncomfortable. And something that when Brian came in too, it's like, we need to rip this Band-Aid off, and people need to see the whole ecosystem of what we're talking about. And so like, if you look at this, like high school paras, here's the set of high school paras, 207, 207, it's all 207s.
But in
Again,
the scheme of things, some of these could, like, a para under 207 and a para not under 207 could be flip-flopped.
So here's one, so in most cases, those are interchangeable, you could flip flop. In some cases, like Title I is not a flip flop situation. Once you're in, we're supposed to be in a position where you're not supposed to supplant.
Supplementing, but not
So you
supplementing.
can use the federal funds, but you can't use the federal funds to pay for something you were already gonna do anyways. So once you have somebody in your system, they performing a certain role, they would have to initially perform that role in Title I. And then you can't shuffle them around. But 207, 206, are just different revenue streams that people can move in and out of. Now, in terms of one other thing that's important is as we think about the possibility of layoffs at any of these different categories of employees, the folks are not there. The likelihood of them being laid off is not impacted in any way by the revenue stream. You know what I mean? So it's not like, oh, I'm in more trouble because I'm being paid for through 207. Their contracts are revenue stream agnostic.
Yep.
And so it's not someone's in more jeopardy because they're being paid for through IDEA, which is special education, or they're in Title I. They're not in more jeopardy than somebody else who's being paid for through Fund 11. So
Do they have other compliance pieces individually on funding source? Or I guess that would just be the grant stuff, like Title I, they have, does the
there's
individual
a whole-
para have?
there's like time, they have to do
Time
time
and effort
reporting,
sheets,
and
yep.
yeah,
Yep.
you have to be able to demonstrate through paperwork over time on a regular basis that you're actually doing the tasks connected to the funding source.
In the
yeah,
case of
there's-
professional staff, you've got to have the right certification to be in that role. If you're funded by a grant, there's more stipulations and regulations with grants.
Patty spends a lot of time in ongoing conversations. Well, Joanne oversees our Title I. The title programs are collectively known as the Consolidated Federal Grant Programs.
Yep.
And so Joanne Simons, who had previously been at central office in a special education role and oversaw Title I. Then, actually, she came in as a Title I
Mhm.
coordinator
Yep.
to start.
Yep.
And was at New Franklin because a lot of our Title I funds were generated as a result of the socioeconomic need connected with Gosling. And so we ran a lot of Title I programs out of New Franklin School. Joanne then moved to central office as a special ed person for a while and then came back to Franklin. She oversees Title I programs for us. Patty handles 2, 3, 4, 4B. Wait a minute, is it
4A.
4A?
Yeah.
As part of her stuff that she oversees in terms of the stuff. And it's a lot of back and forth in all those. We propose things that we get an allocation from the state in the spring-ish, in the
Spring-ish,
summer.
Yep.
And then we start this back and forth conversation with, this is what we're planning to do with those funds. We have to get state approval, and there's a lot of back and forth around how those funds are utilized.
Liz.
Um,
I had one, it's just a follow up for that. I think part of where I'm struggling is the number of people.
Yeah.
On here in comparison across the schools is challenging. But then when you look at the NFS, for instance, budget report, there's 23 FTEs, like there's 64 people, 23 FTEs in that bucket, but they're just all.
So this has been,
Right.
this was a conversation I started with Brian in the fall, was like, we need to be talking about who's really employed here and have it completely transparent to the board, the public, the council. And I don't 207 evolved as a means and the decision-making process to say that that's not part of our conversation as we're budgeting. But somewhere along the way,
For 9 years.
well, right, and so yeah, so it's like a decade, like your experience is a decade, right? And so this is kind of that's been the ongoing kind of conversation. We were encouraged in some circles that maybe this wasn't the year to do it. And I'm like, we just need to do this. We need to have a transparent conversation about the number of people who work for us, how we fund those people, and not exclusively have it linked to just this Fund 11 conversation, which is a portion of what we're really doing. So that was the decision.
Liz.
something else that's come up, I think it was a few years back, maybe when this conversation, I don't know if this is when the conversation started, but, I think there's other items that we're receiving revenue on that I'm not sure in the budget, and I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, like, for example, the money that the high school receives or the school department receives for parking spaces. where does that show up in the budget? And so I think there's other, like, I think, and I don't know if it does. And so I guess I wonder, I think there's items like that, I remember a caller calling in one time, or a constituent calling in one time,
Yep.
asking that question because, it was kind of this idea like, oh, we'll take care of it, but it's like, where is the money coming from? Where is that money going? So I'm curious about that. I also wonder, like, I feel like this cost center 207, I don't know if there's a bigger conversation to be had around it. If the monies is coming from SAU 50, and SAU 50 funds students in middle school and high school, I feel like, having only middle school and high school salaries listed as paid for under this section would make the most sense visually when you're looking at the budgets. Like, so then you could really compare Don Darrow, Little Harbor, New Franklin side by side as, non-self-supporting, like they're support, like the city's supporting those entities where the middle school and the high school are receiving funds for the students. Like, should SAU 50 say to hell with you, we're going to start using our middle school for our high school or something like that? You know what I'm saying? We'd lose that money for those students, and students would go elsewhere or whatnot. So I feel like as far as a visual perspective, having, not having Don Darrow, Little Harbor, and New Franklin staff listed under this section, I think would,
There's
You know.
in 207, trying to think about where. I think we have anybody at the elementaries.
yeah, we do. So we have
One,
DO
two.
sped salaries,
Yep.
we have 4 at Don Darrow, we have 3 at Little Harbor, we have 8 at New Franklin.
Yep.
That just isn't like, I guess from a visual, I know this is like a new thing, but from a visual perspective, those, like theoretically, those aren't being funded by cost center 207 really. But through this practice, they are, so.
So I think, again, I think there's been this evolution, and I might get some of the story wrong because I've just inherited this thing, which I was like, eh. And so I think 207 started as this dumping ground for tuition. There was a bucket to catch the tuition and then the special ed costs that were coming into it. I might have some small details connected with that, Ron. And so that, so then at one time, every single buck that was connected to special education went directly to a staff member who was directly connected to some form of SAU 50 service delivery. This is years ago. I mean, this is a long time ago. And then that faded away. And then people kind of just then it was just a matter of like, here's this other bucket of revenue. Some of it, you'll see some people that are kind of in the same kind of in terms of the thinking, there's still some leftover, which I think is just kind of reflex. There's some leftover application of 207 to those positions. So you tend to see at the high school and at the middle school, or that's where the 207 funds are going more. But really just using it to offset costs, generally. And so it doesn't have to live just in the high school or just in the middle school. The other thing is, Liz, to go to your point about how I think it's important for you to collectively see some of the stuff, to think about, oh, well, we were like the other night, we were talking about tuition. And shouldn't we, if we're going through this tough time, shouldn't SAU 50, potentially should we be looking at shifting more of our cost towards recouping some of it through tuition dollars from SAU 50? What you were just talking about is some portions of SAU 50 are having conversations about exactly that, what I said the other night, value. What is the value of sending our kids to Portsmouth? Now we have a legal agreement called an area agreement, and there's a whole rigmarole that would take to get out of it. But theoretically, people are like, well, what if we send our kids to Winnicott? Could we do that? Well, it's not that easy. It's more complicated than that. But I think we want to be conscious of how are the sending towns perceiving the value of what they're receiving for what they're sending to us in terms of tuition dollars.
But at the same time, I feel like the board has never had a real conversation around the cost of SAU 50 students, or just maybe the understanding of a cost of what are, like, if we're shifting all of these cost centers in 207, and so like, I guess it'd be good to know how much does it cost for an individual student? I think Byron might have brought this up, like, what is the cost for an individual student within our system? And so I understand we want to give them value, but I don't feel like we should be cutting our citizens of Portsmouth short by, Rides getting a deal where the citizens of Portsmouth are paying more for their.
And,
students.
and absolutely not. I don't want to do that. And I don't want to subsidize the surrounding towns' tuition costs through the lift of Portsmouth taxpayers. Absolutely do not want to do that. Our tuition agreement with those surrounding communities is formula driven. So based on what is our cost, it goes into the state, we, and then we vote it. The board votes on it, on an annual basis. And so now there's a certain art and science to what are we applying to which buildings, and that might in the end have some type of a limited impact on what the overall cost of sending a student to Portsmouth High School is. But fundamentally, it's a formula driven number.
I know, but my concern is that 207 is being backed out of the formula. Like,
No,
how are we?
No, so our tuition, what we charge tuition is based on what we spend to educate kids. And then it's broken out on a per pupil basis through the formula. So we're not incorporating 207 as part of what does it cost to educate the kid per pupil.
Okay.
So.
Okay, are we pretty much finished with this? Are there more questions? Carrie?
I think I'm on finance and we're gonna meet. Finance, anyway, I think,
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's a committee. and
Okay.
We want Brian to, not this Brian,
yeah,
Brian, to,
yeah, I think.
Yeah.
you ask him to.
I think understanding this more, like I really appreciate this and understanding now, I think we should maybe really consider a section, like a different sectional budget in which we have income and expenses and aligned of how we're doing, but we can talk about that.
In the finance committee.
So, and
Are you on the finance committee?
Yes.
Okay, that's.
I think those are all good. I think that there's good conversations to be about. I think our interest in the long run is taking some of these, so like there's elements of 206 that we'd like to push get out of 206 and into the regular operating budget, which I think is something you probably mentioned in the past. Like that's something we need to do, just in terms of general, like kind of best practice and general accounting principles. There's some moves that we want to make
Yeah.
that we think are all about,
207.
what's that?
206 or 207?
206 and 207.
Okay.
Particularly 206, we'll do a balance transfer to
Transfer.
206. And so really, we would really want to move those kind of
Yeah.
expenses out of that in a place where it's more transparent, more reflective of what general accounting principles would be,
But for this budget, we're not gonna deal with that.
No.
That's something the finance committee.
I think we can talk
Yeah.
about for future budgets,
But-
how we structure
But it
these
It
buckets.
goes on to my ask for future.
Yep.
things. I think, I have a very good idea of our elementary functioning. I was pretty shocked to hear that there's some courses limited at 12 enrollment. And
I have some follow-up that I'm gonna do because I'm very curious about that story.
Yes.
Too.
But I think what I would like I would like to know more about middle school and high school class sizes, enrollments, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah.
Yep.
Especially like when our classes not, like, is there a minimum enrollment that's been used?
I
Yep.
think there is.
The other piece that is like even more confusing between the redistricting stuff and this to me is I think we need a way to separate especially paras into who is providing EIP services at what FTE.
So we have, correct me
They
if I'm
all-
wrong,
They all are.
everybody's correct, it's right? I don't want to say the wrong thing. Let's say almost, I'm gonna leave open the possibility that there's,
99
some
and
weird-
44
like,
100.
everybody's connected to an IEP.
Yep.
So these are not,
Yep.
like, we don't have a bunch of
No.
So
folks that are
none,
not connected to IEP.
interesting.
Yeah.
So they are not paras, are not supporting intervention. Forgive me.
Well,
There are tutors in there are some tutors. So
Okay.
you've got to look at the terminology. You've got.
which falls under the para association.
Yep,
But there's a few of those folks who are, and it's a higher tier than your normal classroom para.
and a tutor might be working in intervention. And then there might be one para who works just with our ELL students.
Right.
But everybody else who is a para is associated with an IEP.
Okay. Thank you.
And I was trying to-
It's way easier than what it was in my
Yeah,
head.
no, it's,
Yeah.
it's, no, it's.
And it makes me nervous
very
being that
expensive.
absolute about it, because I'm like,
No,
I'm trying to think about the exceptions.
No, it
But
really is.
Patty's not usually this convinced of anything.
I know,
You
I know.
She's
No, I know.
She's sure.
So,
Both.
Or tired, or both, but yes.
I feel like this came up at the last meeting because there was a request, I think, for an additional para that you were declining, and I think I brought up the question, like, does this go to an IEP
So-
or a special education?
so
situation?
it was anticipatory.
Okay.
So, and it was a request for 4 paras, budgeting for 4 paras at Dundero. Because Dundero, because they were anticipating based on what they saw as the profile of their incoming class, they anticipated that that would be a need.
Yep.
Now, in the end, and we did not put those in, we might end up in we might go through our whole budget process, get into the summer, have some of those students start to engage us as an institution and go through a special ed process, referral process, where we come to a determination that 1, the student does need special education services, and 2, that the way by which we would provide those services would be through a para or part of a para, then we're legally obligated to go ahead and employ the person and figure out how we're gonna pay for it. But we rejected the idea of, even though it's probably based on a decent snapshot of what is reasonable to anticipate, that we were gonna go ahead and budget for the 4 paras, thinking that those people definitely would eventually be connected to an IEP. So that was the request. And we had there was other requests. I mean, we had multiple special educator requests
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
That we also turned down. As you know, there was a special educator request at the middle school.
Yep.
And there was, what was the other one I'm thinking of? Come to me.
Para?
Wasn't parents. We had a couple of professionals, connected with special education.
Definitely, I think it might have been high school.
Can you help me understand what that means then? That there's IEP documented recommendation or plan that
Yep.
includes a special educator and a para at the middle school, and how is that being?
So it's not in that case, what, in Phil's request was in connection to the middle school, seeing a increased need around, high intensity behavioral students.
Yep.
Some of whom are IEP based students.
Yep.
And so their desire was, they used to have, a room called the kids program.
Yep.
The kids program was a behavioral based program. And then they went through a period of time when they saw less than that, and they saw an increased need around other forms of intensive special education requirements. And they moved in that direction with that body instead. And now as their student body has evolved, they are finding that they have a cluster of students who is taking up a lot of a combination of assistant principal time, social worker, counselor time. And they're not necessarily, not only are they taking up a lot of that time, they're worried about to what extent are they getting the full breadth of the academics that we want them to have. So that was the request. The request was, we want another special educator to bring back a return to our intensive, we'll call it, well, not intensive, we'll call it mildly intensive behavioral program. That would be, because it's a special education program, it would require a cluster of students who had a profile of disabilities, which include kind of social, emotional and behavioral stuff. So we also turned that down.
Yep.
We turned everything down. As we came into this, because we were guessing which way what the wind was blowing, not which direction the tea leaves were blowing. Mixing my metaphors. But there were, I think thematically from principals and directors, we were hearing this, like, we could use some more folks around some specialized need areas connected to special education. And that's in a period of time too, where we're seeing the expansion of out of district placements. It's not a ton, but it's a lot of pretty expensive kids who have gone out. And that is part of what drives our, $1.3 million increase in special education this upcoming year without requesting these additional positions that principals were asking us for. So,
Do you think there's an out of district placement that could be transitioned back with one new position? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
So with a lot of our, if we had the ability, this is what and I have not analyzed each individual case, but broadly my understanding is, if we had the ability to add a staff member and bring back like a student, we do it. We right off the bat. What's challenging, depending on the nature of the student's disability, they're not just receiving the types of services we would provide. In addition to that, they were receiving site-based counseling.
Yeah.
They've got this kind of wraparound set of services that are connected to their programming, which we can't, excuse me, we can't reproduce in a more cost-effective way. At the moment, we also, in some cases, we're not in a position to professionally manage the expertise needed to provide those services. So sometimes there are specialists that are beyond the ability of a principal, a special ed building-based coordinator to effectively give clinical supervision to. And so sometimes it's money, sometimes it's expertise.
Sometimes it's really the structure of the day, the student's day.
And the day.
Is not, an 8 to 3 kind of day where, it might start at 10 and they might go from 10 to 12 and might not start up again until 3 o'clock. We can't provide flexible schedules either. So there's a lot that goes into it.
And some of them are court ordered, correct?
So, and Brian started to talk about this too. And this is a new phenomenon for me. This is a different type of system than what I was used to in Vermont, but it sounds like, so in Vermont, if the state made a placement on their own, whether it was through the court system or through DCF or someone else, then the state was on the hook for the tuition to go to that type of service. My understanding is that it kind of was more like that before, but the trend has become that rather than a judge saying this, we're ordering that this is going to happen, and now we, the court system, and thus the state, are assuming the costs, that the shift has been, well, here are some general principles that we think you schools should go implement and figure out in conjunction with the in the family, which then is really just a cost shifting measure.
Can I clarify?
for us. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry,
No,
I
this is
don't
in your
think
realm.
of, like legal advice,
this
but
has been-
this is
And I
my
know you're saying
general
about fighting.
understanding of having done this type of work is that a court will order a child go to a certain placement and that's it. The court can't say who is paying for it, how it's paid for or whatnot, just that the child is going there and somebody needs to figure it out. So what happens is that the district and the state start fighting about who's if it's an overnight program, then the state pays for the night part, but who pays for the school education part during the day? And so in the past, districts have sort of automatically assumed it has to be assumed through the IEP, but some districts, they start saying like, hey, we feel we can educate this child within our schools and that we can do that. And so therefore, because of whatever behavioral needs or anything that they have, we shouldn't be on the hook for it. So more schools have started to fight back. You see it a lot in, larger districts with more, higher needs, I guess. And so it tends to be, in my experience, but I haven't worked with the state for several years, it was a gray area of the law. Of like, so who picks up the bill? And the court really cannot order one person or the other to pick up the bill.
So, and we get into, so since I've been here, just what you were talking about, we've been in disputes where there's a conversation about, parent wants a certain program.
Yep.
One round of conversation sometimes is, well, we do feel we can do it in-house. And so we're not in a position to agree to that placement. Then there's a whole appeals process through which we can go. The other one is exactly what you're talking about, Liz, which is we hear the things that we feel here are the elements of the disability profile that we feel are getting in the way of that academics connected to the student. There are other things that are also affecting the student's life, which are not connected to their ability to access the curriculum. And we, respectfully don't feel that we should be paying for those services. And we get into scraps, we get into disagreements with families and advocates, et cetera, around those conversations. And sometimes that requires state intervention to mediate between the two parties. So, but I do agree that it is important at times for districts to be really clear about as effective, weighing both what we think the student needs in order to access the curriculum and thinking about our taxpayers at the same time, that we need to be really thoughtful about what are we agreeing to in connection with some of these students with the most acute need.
Byron.
Just one quick on the ad district, then there's a 402 note for sort of code next to some of the things. I'm just wondering what that meant. So the line items for district campaign with it.
Oh, DD.
What section are you under?
You're being on that one? Okay.
165, it's the added district.
So, we're listed like,
Yep.
so like, on the last page of that district cost center. So it's like placement 12, and then in parentheses it says
Yep.
402, and then the other, on like 24, 25, there's a couple of those. I was just
Yep.
wondering what 402 meant.
I can't speak to that now. I'll make sure that Brian, I'm sure Brian will be able to for sure. And then of course we have Rick coming in on that other.
That's a court ordered placement.
Is 402, okay.
Yeah.
So does the court pay for it?
No, so like I said, the court will place the child, but the court can't say who pays for it. And so oftentimes, because the child, it qualifies under their IEP, the school agrees to it because, that's how the school ends up being on the hook for it. It falls, if, within the IEP process, they pay for the education portion of it. Children can be placed by court order through CHINS, which is somewhat rare. CHINS is child in need of services, usually mental health needs and whatnot. But it's really hard to get a CHINS petition to stick. Sometimes it's the child is involved in the abuse and neglect process through through whatever's going on at home with them. And so therefore the court's placing them. They could also be, within the foster care system through the abuse and neglect process, or, completely abandoned by their parents too. And therefore the court is ordering which way they go as well. And then the juvenile process through delinquency cases, the runaways oftentimes get placement more than others. And so it's, they're committing crimes and they're going through the police department. But generally those are more runaway type cases that get placed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's interesting information. Lisa.
I think I might have lost track, so tell me to put a pin in this if I need to. Are we at the point yet where we're talking about other stuff that we want to hear during the process?
I've got my notes. I'm already taking notes based on what people said. So I'm ready.
Wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
The other hand, was that a question specifically about out of district? Because I don't want to.
Are we finished?
I just have one question comment. Compared to last year, it looks like we might have 6 more students that are out of placement.
Mhm.
Is that something we were anticipating?
So generally, I don't think we anticipate that we're gonna send students out of district. So, we start from the position of, we think we're gonna manage, gonna have them in-house, and that's what we're gonna do. And I think we talked about this before last year. We talked about the concept of least restrictive environment, LRE. So our goal is always to, separate from a financial point of view, It's always how do we give students the most kind of typical experience of other students we can? Which means ideally, your typical classes, you're at your school that's down the street, just like everybody else. You get the typical services of the typical kid. And as we extend out, we're trying to extend out to provide services that are just what you need to bridge your disability to be as typical as you possibly can be, but have a little bit more to get you through the thing you need. Not, here's your disability, now we're going to go way out beyond your disability and do a lot of different things for you. Now, there's a financial impact to that, and the reason why we don't want to do that, but also it's, I mean, fundamentally, we have students who we want to empower to be ready once they leave us, and it might, you know, some students are going to leave us at 18, some of them are going to be with us into their early 20s, depending on disability, but we want them in the best possible position to have agency and be empowered to say, leave us and move out into the world. So that's also part of not providing more service than a student needs, so they become dependent on the service. And it's a delicate balance trying to come to those conclusions. Where we're doing a lot of testing, we're having conversations, we're trying to take, you know, listen to parents and identifying what parents see as the need, and then come to conclusions about what we need to do. I think though, and I've said this before, sometimes it's easy to kind of brush off this conversation about out of district placements and just say, well, it's what we got to do according to the law. Yes, the law prescribes a process by which teachers, parents, other, you know, experts, school psychologists, other people sit around and try to go through a process to determine, is there a disability? And if there is a disability, what do we need to assist the student? But that's could be 8, 10 people sitting around a table in a room having a conversation. Ultimately, through that process leads to some outcome that could lead to an outcome that spends a lot of money. And so, is that specific outcome prescribed by the law? Not necessarily. Process and it gets us. So, I mean, it's reasonable to be talking. And again, I think the other quick thing, which is a repeat for everybody, is we are always in the process of trying to identify clusters of students that would allow us to then say, okay, we've got enough students so we could employ a classroom teacher, 2 paras, bring on an extra half of an FTE of a BCBA, and that would still cost less than sending the students out of district. And we can give the students what they need, and they're in their local school. Like, we're always looking for those opportunities, but they have to be opportunities that we see the need over time. And then we see a longer term, there's a longer term prospect that for, hey, the next 7 years, we might need that type of service, because you got to bring people on board. It takes them a couple of years to kind of ramp up to really be hitting the way you want to hit them. You don't want to do that and say, we're doing this for like 3 years and then we bag the program and then we move on, because then it costs a lot of money to build it up. And now people have, so it's a delicate, it's really hard. This is super challenging for all schools. And we're in a better position than many. But still, this really hits us hard this year.
So I just have another question. I've noticed too, the tuition itself, like we have one that's 406,000, one that's 557,000. In comparing it to last year, we've got nothing that's even close to that.
Mhm.
Home status type thing that.
So very often the most expensive programs tend to be residential programs. So you're paying for the student to be on site living at a certain location. Then someone was saying before, there's you've got kind of the core default kind of overnight residential placement, which is probably going to put you in the 250 range start out of the gate. And then you get into, we're doing this type of specialized counseling, we're adding OT, we're doing this other thing, and then you have this other range of services that then we are additionally charged for. And that's where you get up to where you are. It's also an environment, I think Liz was talking about this in one of our last meetings, where the folks who provide these types of specialized placements, the market is in their favor, because there's not a lot of folks who do it. There are less and less folks who do it, and there's more and more districts looking for placements.
Some of that also ramps in transportation. So
Yeah,
there's cost of transportation.
It wasn't transportation separate?
No, not with these.
Not with these, okay.
based on this, can we get, I understand, so at first I thought the placement numbers tracked, which they don't.
Yep.
Like 7 is not 7 on each year. Could we get? I'm trying to think of how to keep this confidential, but like,
Yep.
can we get the percentage increase? For
Connected to individual students.
connected to continuing placements.
Yep. Yep.
So that we can
Yep.
say that our out of district placements went up 12%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
Or
whatever
whatever-
amount of that is built in, X amount of that is built into existing placements.
Right.
Where we saw those existing services now cost us 25% more than they did a year ago. And to break that out from like new placements as a
And
difference.
do new placements and do continuing placements, because
Yep.
I think
Yep.
whatever we decide will be important in that.
good idea.
No, I think that's important.
All right, let's try to sum this up.
Lisa has been waiting.
Lisa and then Liz.
Interjected.
But it's not about out of district placement.
That's fine. No, go.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I did have one tangential question around that, which I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. When we have specialists where maybe we don't have that exact service available in staff, and that person comes into the school, does that show up under out of district, or does that just show up somewhere else?
Sometimes contracted services.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And it would, and it would fall, we could try to make sure that is becomes, we add that as a, how do we make sure that's transparent, really visible?
Because it-
Where are those contracted services?
Anecdotally, like that's more, but that could be like the random sample size.
No, and that's happening, so there's different ways in which that's happening. One is sometimes we're unable to hire for a position.
Yep.
And so then we're stuck and it's like, well, we have an IEP obligation that we have to, or
Yep.
we're in trouble legally. So then in that case, we would go out to a third party and contract that third party to send somebody in who's not our employee to do the work. Not ideal. Unless it's like this small sliver, we only need somebody for 2 hours a week.
That's
That type of thing, then we can say, okay, let's use the vendor. So there's that. And then there's also at times where some of our folks, depending on the year and how caseloads have kind of expanded or contracted, they're just overwhelmed. They're well beyond and in some cases, I think right now, BCBA's
Yeah.
probably are
Yep.
struggling to kind of manage the caseloads they have, where they're both involved in direct service to students, but then also are working with staff around strategies and that type of thing.
Yeah.
So at any given time, our flex, when we hit a situation where we get overwhelmed, is we can go third party and use contracted services.
Two totally unrelated
Yep.
questions. You don't have to answer them all now, but I just want to put them out
Good.
there. I
Yep.
think one, I may have mentioned this before, but I'd love to get some general understanding of what types of options we may have if we have to be looking in the direction of buyouts or early retirements or other
Yep.
financial incentives, just so it's clear what types of things we would be able to offer to people. So I feel like the last resort should be just sort of, making that involuntary if there's ways to
Yep.
in some way incentivize it. Just understanding that. And then I do feel like,
Just put that in context really
Yeah.
quickly. My understanding, the last time this was offered, it was $20,000. And folks who were eligible had to be here for at least 15 years and eligible for retirement.
that's like, what,
It's like-
98% of us?
Well, I mean, so in terms of 15 years, but I think they also had to be eligible. I think they had to be eligible for state retirement at the same time. Not all of our folks were that.
Okay.
So just as you start to kind of conceptualize, like, what's the math? How would that work out? That's what it was the last time around. My conversations with Steve Z. That's what was offered the last time
Okay.
we did this. So that doesn't mean we have to structure it the same way. We could look at other types of things, but I can come back to with some options.
And then I think that I am curious a little bit about getting some more understanding of some of the budget at the high school, because I do think it's clear, and others have said that, at the elementary and middle school level to kind of unpack it. And I don't know about it. I've never heard of like the exact cap on class sizes, but I've definitely heard of situations where students are not being placed in classes they're told are too full. That could be, I don't know what the number is that makes them
Yeah.
too full. There's also some classes where either due to demand or due to the sort of specialized nature of the instruction, they're not as big. Intentional reasons for that.
Yep.
But I feel like if we're talking about staffing, I think it
Totally
is
agree.
helpful to have that conversation in the context of not just like the average class sizes, because that kind of like
No,
makes it
'cause
seem
that-
like it's
that can
like,
make it muddy.
maybe it is 12 in every room if you average it, but just to have some idea of kind of what the range is and kind of what the decision process is around that.
Yeah.
And sort of along those lines, I think I'm also curious a little bit about if we're making full use of some of the things the state actually pays for. Like in terms of high school options to do classes at Great Bay and UNH for free or at a discount, and like the integration with community college. I would never want to replace instruction in the building where we have that, but if we're talking about cutting back in any areas, it just seems like it would be good to know where there are areas where our students could still have those opportunities. I don't know if that's a precise. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's try, we just wanted to talk about after Liz talks, what other areas would you like to have at these meetings?
Right, I'm getting some of these stuff, so I'm flushing out these questions, yeah.
That's what I'm here to offer. I think, given the budget crunch that we're going into, and I think, you know, we don't have, you know, we had one community member who happened to be on city council here tonight in public comment. I assume though, as we push forward and if we are pushing for a 4.99 whatever % increase when the city is asking us for less, we're likely gonna have some community members picking apart our budget and having to answer those things. So I think for me, you know, if I were an outsider looking in, you know, not an outsider, but if I was a community member taking a look at this budget, the first thing that I would look at was this main page. And I feel like we're locked into our salaries unless we cut staff. So I think what we really need to do is look at our operating budget. And so I'm hoping that there could be some more clarity as we go through this process around the operating budget. You know, I pick out a couple little red flags or have a little tab here. You know, I'm looking at the operating budget for central office at $300,000. Now I know I can go to the cost center and see what's in there. And if I do under, you know, 170, you know, I do have a question. I know that outside legal counsel is cheaper than in-house.
Yep.
But if you do the math, it looks like you're spending 5 hours, you're paying for 5 hours of legal time a week. The other aspect too is, there's there's some text stuff that's on there, and I don't know if that's cross-referenced with the other, you know, like the personal database on there. So there's also this mentor teacher that's doubled from 67K to 125. So I think some of these operating expenses, because salaries are pretty locked in on, I have questions around. I mean, another example is the technology plan. Obviously, we went over that tonight, but that's doubling. So we go from an operating of 300,000 to 600,000 for tech. So some of these operating budgets, I guess I would have questions around, and I think those, I'm gonna guess that maybe community members would have questions around those too. So I'm hoping we could sort of delve into that a little more. The other thing is that, and I hate to say this, I know we're in teacher negotiations, but I guess I wonder if we could have a non-public to talk a little bit more about, I mean, obviously the city has to approve those, but we have all this information in the front about the health plans. And so I guess I wonder, you know, do we intend to have a cost shift through negotiations? You know, I don't want to flare anything up, but I mean, I think every year there's this, or every time there's negotiations, there's this questions of, are we gonna make staff pay more for their health plan or not? And obviously, if they were, that would affect our budget. So I guess I'm curious the interplay between the budget process and some of these costs that, you know, we're not gonna ding down people's salaries or employees' salaries unless they're, you know, new or coming in. So, I guess, you know, where is it more malleable as far as what we could play with for numbers? And I think that's always been a question potentially amongst staff too, of whether there's gonna be a year where they have to pay more for their health benefits.
So I'm definitely open to having a conversation with Tom Clausen about what, at this point, while we're mid-negotiation, we can share outside of the team. I think the financial constraints of the city and the impact of the cost of total compensation for teachers, which includes all benefit and salary, your negotiating team is very aware of, and I think there's an ongoing conversation about all those things. And I'm happy to talk with Tom about what would be appropriate or inappropriate for us to share in non-public while we're mid-negotiation. But the things you're talking about, we're totally aware of. I would say, the way to think about this, and the city council is aware of this, is that effectively the run rate, for us to continue to have level services with the increases that come within collective bargaining, we run at about 4.5%. If we change nothing on an annual basis, we run at about a 4.5% clip, just to maintain what we have. So as soon as you get into a conversation about 2.9, you're, and 80%, more than 80% of what we do is people. It's people, in order to hit those types of numbers. You can do some things on the margins, but that operating budget, there's not a lot in that operating budget that's going to get you towards the type of figures that the city council is talking about without getting to folks.
And then the other thing, I know Kate brought up offering early retirement. I feel like that was something we did pretty consistently with Steve, and I don't know, I think we kind of skipped out on that before.
He said he's gonna look at.
Okay.
I think
alright.
here's my concern. My concern about that, I just tell you that why that practice changed is that my understanding of the intermediate history of that practice was effectively every other year, people were offered a buyout. It was pretty regular,
Yeah,
and people could pace themselves to it, which I think creates a culture of like, I'll just hang in there until the
2 more
year B, and then I'll grab the money, 20 on the way out the door,
yeah,
which doesn't really help us in management in terms of trying
yeah, I
to
don't think we were pulling the.
create an outbound kind of, the kind of cost savings we might find on either through attrition, having people leave and then not filling the roles, or hiring cheaper folks.
Less expensive.
I think it's less expensive, sorry, less expensive folks. So, so if that was the case, so what we had been building towards, and we've been talking about internally for a couple of years, is waiting and then offering something that was where we could tell people, hey, where we could introduce it in the spring and say, we need you to tell us in the fall whether or not you're going to take this, so that we were in a position to then, through the course of our planning process, if you have to tell us on October 1st, strategically, how can we then be thoughtful about, okay, here are these people who are going to retire now. How many of those positions do we just grab back to save money? And which ones do we want to restructure and then post it and then move forward with, so that we can reach our strategic goals? When we do it now, you're less likely to get it other than saving money, and you're not necessarily going to get some of those other efficiencies that you could build in with a more thoughtful process. Doesn't mean we don't look at it. We should actually totally have a conversation about it as we think about how do we save the staff that we've got.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Carrie, can you sum this up for us? Because we got one other item to talk
We
about.
got little additions. We've gotten those emails about the 3-year PTO pay.
Mhm.
Can you just factor in how that works so if we have, I don't remember how many, say 4 people that have already given us notice that they're going to be retiring in 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
Can we do a lump sum payout for those on that PTO benefit? And then, does it make sense?
Yes, and I've got one. There's one that's somewhat like that, that's already built into our full plan. We've already seen the savings, but we can come back to you on it. So how many people are in the pipeline?
Are you saying there are 4?
I don't
No,
remember.
how many?
Oh,
And they're all different stages.
saying,
They're
like,
collecting of
There are
3 years worth of.
We receive those letters, intent to retire, essentially, and how, if we give a 20, whatever, if we give some sort of buyout, do they also get that in addition, is the question.
Can I ask a point of order question? Since we started at 6:30, do we need a vote to keep going?
Our rules.
This is time and not length of time. Yeah.
And then can you just,
we have that, but.
can you just look into Brian's salary, which increased 10%? I assume it's because that was the holder for a business administrator as a number, but it just is a big leap.
Okay, anybody else? All right, the only other thing we have is, if you look at the schedule on the 11th, I'm gonna talk with Kenny about facilities and ground. On the 18th, we have special ed with Rick. On March 4th, it's to be determined. So what we can do, we talked today at our agenda meeting, is if we want to add someone with Rick the night of special education, if people feel that there's more topics they want to discuss, we can split Rick and then add 2 people on March 4th, or if we feel that we don't need to do that, what are other areas people want to hear about?
So some of this, I'm gonna take the questions that people just gave me and think about
I mean,
who are the folks that I need to bring to the table based on those
Okay.
questions.
okay,
Because, and I'll just try to figure out who the people are best equipped to answer those questions with specificity and bring those folks to the table. Either if they are, where I think there's gonna be some exchange back and forth, when I bring them in person. If there's stuff that is one-off where I think they can answer in a half a page memo they give to you, I might have them just do that. But I'll try to curate based on the things that I was just, that
Okay.
people were just asking about.
okay,
And
yes, Byron.
I should say, we could follow up with email on specifics, like beyond this moment.
Yeah, as you're reading stuff and you're hitting things and it's like, oh, this seems weird to me.
Yeah.
Then, I might have someone from the bullpen who can come in and talk about the weird thing.
We can get
so-
an answer like in an email or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, does that sound good to everybody? But we still have an open day on March 4th. So keep that in mind. Well, why don't you look at what you?
Yeah, let me
have?
see, because I might walk away from, and I already got some ideas, but I might walk away from this and be like, you know what? Let's, here's so-and-so that would be great on the 4th
Okay,
to bring in.
okay,
So,
okay, is everybody all set? Are we all set?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Okay.
I do.
Bye.
Oh.